in the Council Chamber in County Hall, Usk. It is my pleasure to welcome my fellow councillors, officers and staff, along with viewers watching online. And I would also like to extend a warm welcome to members of the public who are attending in the Chamber today. Welcome. I'd like to remind councillors online that they must keep their cameras on at all times and to use the hand up facility that will appear in the chat if they would like to speak. And I'd also like to remind everyone to turn their mobile devices to silent. Depending on how we proceed, my intention is to have a courtesy break every 1.5 to 2 hours, but if you need to, just raise your hand. Thank you. And the first item is apologies for absence. I believe I have apologies from Councillor Stevens and Councillor Riley, I believe. Do I have any other apologies? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Declaration.
Thank you. No further declarations of interest. Thank you. Chair's announcements we'll take as read, which leads us on to public questions. Questions from a member of the public. Just to say in advance, there is a 15-minute slot for this whole section on questions from members of the public. So I just remind each questioner that they've got 7.5 minutes for the entirety of their slot. And so we'll continue on that basis. I believe the first question is submitted by Mr. Pearce.
Shemai, hello. Councillors, the doubts that you had about the Dixton Road in Monmouth development have been confirmed by the objections from 5 trusted organisations. I have slides for this, but I've not been allowed to use these today, but I think there was a pack sent to you last night, and I think there should be some handouts that have been placed on your desks. Cadw said it will bring modern, dense development much closer and will be clearly visible. They said there is a clear likelihood that it will have an unacceptably damaging effect, upon the settings of the Scheduled Ancient Monument and the Dixton Conservation Area. The Wye Valley National Landscape, or ANOB, also delivered a robust response. They seemed particularly miffed that allocation HA4 made no reference to the Wye Valley National Landscape and its location within the landscape setting. They said the development of the site would impact special qualities of the picturesque, extensive and dramatic views from Offa's Path and the Kimmin. They went on to say that, as it currently stands, there is insufficient evidence that the national landscape has been considered and evidenced in putting the land at Leesbrook as a strategic allocated site in the ANOB, in the RLDP. And don't forget, the ANOB has the same powers in law as a national park. National Resources Wales reminded the Council that its own landscape sensitivity report of 2020 that building on the Dixton Road site would be highly undesirable. I repeat, highly undesirable, the words of National Resources Wales. And then there are the Greater Horseshoe Bats. You will recall that just before Christmas, I presented to you about how the Council had removed key protections for the endangered bats from the RLDP. This has been jumped on by 3 bodies. Firstly, Monmouth Town Council voted unanimously to raise 7 objections to the Dixton Road development, including concerns about the development within the sightline and core sustenance zone for the bats. Secondly, Gwent Wildlife Trust said that it could potentially impact the integrity of the special area of conservation and that the proposals may not be suitable for taking forward. And lastly, Natural Resources Wales refuted the claims in the HRA, which said there would be no adverse effect on the bats. They said, we're unable to agree with this conclusion. We're unable to agree with this conclusion. They then go through a robust series of objections.
Excuse me, Mr. Pearce, you're halfway through the slot given for your question and answer.
Okay, just about to finish up.
If you can come to your question, thank you.
So they said they could conclude the development is unable to proceed or at least be severely constrained. Our council is aware that these objections from some of the most important bodies in the country confirm how important the Dixton Road site is. How will the council respond to these objections? Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. I will address my remarks to the question on the agenda. Council is aware that the deposit plan for the replacement local development plan includes the site being referred to, the site Dixton Road, Monmouth. A full public consultation on that proposal, on the whole plan, took place at the end of last year, and all responses will in due course be reported to the council with a review of those responses by myself. Several of the quotations which have been referred to are the responses to that consultation. Those are being reviewed, they are being appraised, and council will receive a response to those statements at that time. Where sites have been included in the deposit plan, potential developers are preparing for the situation where they may be included in a future approved plan. And as part of that preparation, potential developers are asking the County Council whether an application on a particular site would require an environmental impact assessment. Such a question takes the form of a formal request to the local planning authority, which consults relevant statutory consultees on the requirement for an environmental impact assessment. Several of the quotations which have been put to you relate to the comments on the inquiry as to whether there should be an environmental impact assessment. Both Cadw and the Wye Valley National Landscape Team responded to this request by listing reasons, not necessarily to oppose the inclusion of a site, but reasons why an environmental impact assessment should be a requirement. The development management team at our council has already made public the decision that on the basis of the evidence, the submissions of bodies such as these, and the statutory criteria, an environmental impact assessment will be required. That is not particular to this site. The same process has been applied to the strategic site in Chepstow, and the same conclusion has been publicised. There will be a requirement, quite rightly in my view, for an environmental impact assessment. Our decision to require an EIA on this site and others is evidence of our commitment to uphold environmental protections and maintain full regard for the environmental impact of development proposals within the deposit plan.
Thank you, Councillor.
I mentioned earlier
I'm sorry, we've run out of time. That is the fully allotted time for this slot. Thank you. If you wish to ask further questions, you can seek to do that through your local councillor or by writing to the Cabinet member. Thank you. And the other question from a member of the public today is from Ms. Justine Johnson, please. I'd like to remind Council and those watching online that the purpose of the slot for questions from a member of the Council is just that, to ask a question to the relevant Cabinet member in the Council. And those questions are submitted in advance. So I just like that to be borne in mind now and in the future. So the same applies. We've got 7.5 minutes for your question and answers, please.
Hello, my name's Justine Johnson and I'm a resident on Goldwire Lane, and I've come here to ask a question today. I think you received a little pack as well from the presentation. I represent a lot of people who are really quite upset about the experimental traffic order that's been imposed on Goldwire Lane at the moment. We have 334 signatures across 2 petitions. So we're concerned about flooding, the validity of the experimental traffic order, and the lack of consultation with the wider affected community. Sorry, I'm quite short. Can you hear me? I feel as if I need a box to stand on. Thank you. Okay, so my question, please. Under what criteria is the experimental traffic regulation order being assessed, and will the results be made available to the residents and the public for full consultation and consideration before a decision is made on Goldwire Lane's future? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Mrs Johnson. This information is in fact provided in the documents on the County Council website. In these documents we explain that the Council will monitor the effect of the order on the nearby highway network and on the section of Goldwire Lane that is subject to the order, to assess the effect on highway users, including but not limited to those who drive, walk, cycle and scoot. The order came into effect on October the 25th. It can remain in operation for a period of up to 18 months. However, after the initial 6-month period has elapsed, the Council will review the effect on the adjacent highway network. If this has not been disproportionate, then we will proceed to make the order permanent. In terms of consultation, residents of the section of the lane subject to the order were consulted in advance with letters delivered by hand. No objections were made. Consultation is currently open throughout the 6-month period, and residents can submit comments in writing, as is also clearly stated on the website. Please note that with this order in place, anyone who drives down the section of Goldwire Lane in question without a legitimate reason for access to the properties in this section will be doing so illegally, in contravention of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984. As I explained at Council in December, this order was prompted by a request from local residents for something to be done about the dangers they face from cars using this road as a shortcut. This was confirmed in a letter signed by 11 residents of Goldwire Lane. It has also become clear on Goldwire Lane, and there are many residential streets south of the lane from where people use the old route across the bridge, over the Clouthie, to walk into town, to schools, etc. The map I've also provided shows you how many streets this affects in terms of pedestrian access, showing the link from that little bridge to all of the footpaths that reach those residential streets. There have been several near misses and minor accidents involving cars and other users, including mobility scooters and pedestrians, and colleagues recently stopped to help a partially sighted elderly lady with a walking frame across the lane. She was unable to navigate her way around a car blocking her path and was genuinely terrified. This is about road safety for everyone. People may be injured or even killed because of non-compliance with road safety rules, but also their freedom and independence is lost because they don't feel safe to go out. This affects children, people without cars, as well as elderly, frail and disabled people. It affects not only those that currently use the route, but also the many more who might use it if it was safe. I would like to add a final point, and I'm sorry about this, Mrs. Johnson, but I believe that you have told an untruth about me on social media and in a video. This lie was repeated by Councillor Lucas in this chamber. They both claimed that I referred to residents as road rats. I will take this opportunity to state categorically that this is a lie. I've never used such a term, and neither have the officers, and I would ask that she and Councillor Lucas correct this lie publicly, here and on social media, and that they desist from further defamation of my character. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We have a couple of minutes left if you wish to ask a supplementary question.
I'm going to say I think it's very unfair. I have much more information that could be added, but I'm not allowed to because I'm allowed to ask a question. Very unfair, and I want that noted. I have never said that you've called us road rats. It was a road run, rat run. No, and I've got no time to ask supplementary questions when all you can do is deliver the same speech you gave last time. Appalling.
Noted. Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of December. Do I see any dissent to those minutes? In which case I propose that those are accepted. I see no dissent. Thank you. So the next item is item 6, reports to Council. Item 6.1, Councillor Callard, please, to present the Council Tax Reduction Scheme.
Thank you, Chair. Councils are required to adopt the Council Tax Reduction Scheme annually by the 31st of January. The Council Tax Reduction Scheme has been in place since 2013. The scheme is fully funded by Welsh Government and seeks to help thousands on low income pay their council tax. The Council Tax Reduction Scheme is a means-tested benefit which can cover up to 100% of a household's council tax. In adopting the scheme, this allows for the annual uprating of benefits and personal allowances in line with inflation. In addition, the Council Tax Reduction Scheme regulations laid by Welsh Government apply a few specific amendments for the 2025-2026 scheme. These allow payments from the Victims of Terrorism Compensation Scheme to be disregarded indefinitely as capital, and that people displaced from Sudan, Israel, Palestine or Lebanon are eligible to apply for a council tax reduction. Also, to make the scheme easier to access and simpler to administer, from the 1st of April 2025, the regulations have been amended to allow a person in receipt of universal credit to be recognised by the local authority as having made an application for council tax reduction. There are currently 5,378 households in receipt of the benefits from the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, and the Council is expected to spend £9 million on the scheme in 2025-2026. I hope the Council today can join me in support of the recommendations in this report. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Callard. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. If you recall, you may recall, last year we specifically asked that when this report was discussed that there was every effort made to advise members of the public of the opportunities afforded in the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. And I was wondering, and officers may not be able to respond now, could we be advised if there has indeed been an uplift in the number of people who have, because they've claimed to have been deemed eligible to for the Council Tax Reduction Scheme? And can we also request that similarly the same information is publicly shared to enable those who may not realise that they could have some eligibility for the scheme, and could that also be shared with members again as it was last year? Additionally, Chair, I apologise, I didn't manage to put my hand up in time, but I was rather surprised at Councillor Maybe taking the opportunity to raise a personal matter with that resident during the debate, and I didn't think that was particularly welcome, certainly, or what this chamber is for.
Sorry,
thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any more, anyone wishing else to speak to the Council Tax Reduction Scheme? in which case I suggest we go to the vote. The recommendations, with the recommendation report, which are to note it and to take it forward, I think. Can we have the voting function, please? It's not shown up in my chat. Oh, there it is. I'm seeing the hands going up. I'm seeing more hands going up. I see two, before we vote, I see two more hands going up. Councillor Watts.
No, Chair, I clicked it on and in fact, there seemed to be some kind of technical error here, so I'm clicking on the council, the vote for, against or abstain. That's not working either, so whether it's been corrected or not on the screen, I don't know.
Chair, the voting hasn't come through.
Yes, I'm seeing that. Just wait for one moment, please, while we try and let's get that sorted. Can I suggest a show of hands? So those. Oh, it's appeared. Thank you. That's through. Thank you. That's carried. Our next item of business is the Gwent Regional Partnership Board Area Plan and RPB Annual Report. Councillor Chandler, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm pleased to introduce this agenda item, as I said, which is the Gwent Regional Partnership Annual Report for 23-24. The Regional Partnership Board Annual Report is brought to Council members each year for review and comment to highlight the progress and difference made to our residents. The report has been developed on a regional footprint and highlights programmes of work that are being taken forward across Monmouthshire, Newport, Torvine, Blaenau Gwent and Caerphilly. The work programmes included in the report are prioritised by the RPB, and these include children and families, autism and neurodivergence, carers, adults, dementia, social care and housing, and mental health and learning disability. The RPB has a statutory requirement to develop a population needs assessment through engaging with citizens and using both local and national data. And this was completed in 2021 and highlighted the health and social care needs of the population of Monmouthshire and the rest of the region. You will have seen that before, but it is also attached as an appendix to this report. Subsequently, an area plan for 2023 to 27 was developed, and this is the action plan for the RPB and identifies the priorities it needs to take forward to meet the needs identified within that population needs assessment. And that area plan was presented to Council in October 2023, but again is attached to this report for your information. The RPB works collaboratively, as we do as a council, across Gwent to deliver on these priorities and to report progress each year to the RPB, the 5 councils within Gwent and to Welsh Government. The area plan is a living document and is reviewed quarterly through each of the 7 strategic partnerships that sit within the RPB governance structure to ensure that any emerging themes or changes in needs that are coming through the system are addressed. The RPB also works closely with colleagues in the Gwent Public Service Board to ensure there is no duplication of efforts when developing the area plan and their wellbeing plans, and we continue to collaborate through delivery and reporting. And of course, we also work with residents to ensure that their voices are heard throughout, as they're at the heart of all the work that we do. So this report was written by Natasha Harris, who's the head of the Regional Partnership team within the Regional Partnership Board, and I'm pleased to say that Natasha has joined us online so that she can answer any questions that members have and to hear your feedback. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'm looking for anyone who'd wish to comment or question. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members, and good Happy New Year to you all. In saying it once again. Chair, I'd just like to ask a quick question through yourself to the Cabinet member. Many months ago now, we were asking for data on My Day, My Life, on what we had in vulnerable adults out there and people, and actually we never had that data. I mean, it was very confusing. It was, the best to say, it was all over the place. And still, we don't know how many vulnerable adults are out there within the, let's say, the Brunacombe area and the wider areas. So how can we actually take this data that we're using here as factors, as evidence? Because we didn't even have an answer to that question, Chair. That's the point I want to make, is how reliable is this evidence we're receiving when not many months ago we couldn't actually collate the evidence for the vulnerable and the needed in Abergavenny. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to suggest we take a few comments and questions, and we'll, if there's a lot, we'll take them in sections, but otherwise I'll invite Councillor Chandler to respond at the end. Councillor Watts.
Sorry, Chair, I'm having problems with my computer. I'm pretty sure Paul is ahead of me on the hands up there, but because I did mention I've got a rush. I wondered if Paul would be good enough to allow me to speak just before him, so I can effectively leave, if that's all right. Is that all right with Councillor Pavier?
It's very clear on my screen, Councillor Watts, that you're first to speak, you're next to speak, followed by Councillor Pavier.
Okay. All right, so my question is, obviously I sit with Penny on the Public Service Board, and I guess the broader themes of this document relate to social exclusion and social injustice, but there doesn't seem to be any mention of, I guess, access to equality as far as access to justice, whether that's in civil court or family court. As you know, legal aid has disappeared many years ago under the last Conservative government, and subsequently it's caused significant delays in all courts across the country. They've been going on for months now. Family court delays now, I think, touch on 24 months. I think that's unacceptable. And I just wondered why that was. Why are we not addressing that in Wales? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, the confusion is that you're on the list twice, Councillor Watts, but I'll let you just have the one go. Councillor Pavier.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Can I thank the Cabinet member for presenting the report? There's obviously a lot of good areas of progress referenced throughout the report in terms of engagement and co-production, support for carers, use of assisted technology, improved care for mental for those with dementia. Improved access to mental health resources and training. All really good stuff. There's obviously areas of concern that are referenced again through the report. Again, looking at continued system pressures and the impact of COVID still having a very long tail in terms of waiting times and impacting on early intervention issues. Workforce challenges, again littered throughout, I think, areas of recruitment and retention across the region in both health and social care, particularly domiciliary care, is again a major cause of concern. Still issues in terms of long waits for assessments for autism and neurodevelopmental issues, and in terms of progress on integration and coordination between health and social care, still a need to go further and faster to avoid duplication and to ensure accountability really is key from not just from health and social care but from all the partners around the RPB table. But I think one of the issues it's sort of referenced in there about resource pressures, the issue around substantial resources, not just for the RPB who receive grant funding from Welsh Government, but resourcing for local government is a fundamental area here. I think local government of Wales has consistently maintained, and rightly so, the primary factors for influence in health and well-being lie beyond the scope of the NHS. The responsibility for promoting mental and physical well-being, as well as fostering robust and resilient communities, largely rests with local authorities and the delivery of key services such as housing, leisure, social services, employment services, education. And the ability for local authorities to deliver these key services properly does prevent early illness and physical and mental deterioration, and stops individuals accessing acute NHS services before their natural time. And yet we're going through a budget cycle, and the Cabinet member will be aware, and the leader will be aware, because I know she recently gave evidence to the Senate Finance Committee about the dire state of local government finance in Wales. Really unprecedented financial strain. Social care alone accounted for 40%, £223 million of pressure next year of the total of 559 billion that local government will be facing. And the levels of overspend that are attributed to social services right across Wales, but particularly across the Gwent region, that spend is outstripping the funding allocated by Welsh Government for those services. So until we really address the resource issue, and there are some, as I said, some really positive partnerships, strategic partnerships and collaborations that are highlighted in the report. We really are scratching the surface of trying to get to improving, what are the key elements of the RPB, what it's there to deliver to improve outcomes and health and well-being for citizens across our region, to provide coordinated personal-centred care and support, and to make more effective use of resources, skills and expertise. But until we tackle that resource issue at a national level, then these small-scale collaborations are really not going to deliver what we need for them to deliver. And I suppose to conclude, my plea to the Cabinet member is obviously to take back to the RPB, but for the leader who continues to advocate on this council's behalf and for other local authorities across Wales through the WLGA, is to really stress that element to Welsh Government. The local authorities, local councils can do so much more. They could be game changers in terms of improving the lives, health and well-being of our citizens if given the appropriate support and funding to do that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Chair. It's to do with housing and the effects of the use of disabled facilities grants. There seems to be problems with residents getting the support they require in their housing. For example, if you've lost a leg, you need some support to get upstairs. So the question really is, do we ensure that the effective use of disabled facilities grants are used, and surely we can do it better, and is there a finite amount that we've got for those grants? Because I think there's a concern for elderly, well, not just elderly, a lot of residents who are in a position where they can't move, but they need their property developed so they can use it better, but it doesn't seem to be getting through as quickly as they'd like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other further hands up, so I'm going to invite Councillor Chandler to respond. And if you wish to invite an officer to contribute, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors. Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer all of the questions. In terms of Councillor Howarth, I wasn't aware that you were waiting for some specific numbers, so from that it would have been helpful to have a reminder if that's the case. My understanding that was more of a general thing. Obviously the numbers of vulnerable adults are shown in the population needs assessment in terms of we're looking at that, in terms of specifically around the Abergavenny area. I'm not sure if we've got easy access to that data, but that's a separate issue from the one you raised about My Day, My Life, which obviously obviously we have moved ahead with, and I could say more about that because that's a very specific council issue rather than an RPB issue. Obviously the RPB though does have its remit to cover those areas, so I might bring in Natasha to talk about that in a minute. I can't answer Councillor Watts' questions around the quality impact assessment and access to justice and things like that, so I will ask Natasha to address that one. Councillor Pavia's question, though, is good. Thank you very much for the sort of the considered assessment of this. And yeah, I'd agree your assessment. You know, the report does demonstrate some good progress in many areas, but it does also highlight a number of areas of concern. And I share those areas of concern around waiting times, particularly, as you said, for assessments for autism and other neurodivergent conditions, around the whole issue about recruitment and retention of professional staff within local authorities and within the health board and others. All of those are very valid, and that need for further integration, we are pressing ahead as far as we can go on that, and there's always more that we can do and trying to do. The resources issue, I think, is also, I can't disagree with you on that. You know, the resources is a challenge. We all know that. It's a challenge everywhere across the UK and in Wales for social care. Absolutely right, the importance of local authority in sort of supporting people's mental health and well-being and independence. And I've had conversations directly with the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care, Jeremy Miles, where we've talked about the importance of how local authorities can work in an early intervention way and to prevent the need for people, or to delay the need for people to go into statutory services. And it's a point I think that he has taken forward. So I think a lot of the debate around hospital discharge and delayed pathways of care of people getting out of hospital, and that's shifted now to talk about much more about preventing people going into hospital. But clearly more work is needed, more resources are needed, but we are within this authority taking forward a programme of looking at how we across the whole council and with the partners that we've got in the community can do more of that early intervention and prevention work, so it's not just become a social care responsibility, it becomes a much wider responsibility. And I hope to be able to report more on that at some point in the future. And I know this is initiatives that are being shared across but with other local authorities in Gwent and the Partnership Board. In terms of Councillor Eason's issue around housing and DFGs, I mean that is both a local authority issue and a more wider RPB issue. And certainly within our budget, we have put in capital budgets for DFGs. I would like it to be more, and we're looking at exploring a business case. And in fact, Councillor Birch, who's responsible for housing, and myself are meeting with officers next week, I think, to look at how we can develop a business case for looking at the impact of increasing the capital budget on DFGs and how we can collaborate with others. But that would be a longer term process. But I know that the RPB also has an issue on that. So that's probably my response. But Natasha, can I ask you to come in, particularly on that latter point on DFGs, but also on the point from Councillor Watts around the impact assessment and access to justice and any other areas you feel you could contribute to on those questions.
Yep, can you hear me? Okay, I can see people nodding. Okay, so regarding the population needs assessment, we did a lot of extensive engagement across Gwent, asking people what their thoughts were on health and social care and what their experiences were and what the needs were going forward, so we could look at gaps and where we needed to set up service provision, but also where things were working well and might need upscaling, but also where there were gaps. So we did a lot of engagement at the time of the population needs assessment, and I'm pleased to say that's ongoing. We're constantly engaging throughout each year just to make sure that we're up to date with the data and the needs that we've got. We also worked very closely with Data Cymru at the time, who fed a lot of the data through to us, and we had a lot of national data sets sent through to us, as well as some more localised data sets from Public Health Wales, local authorities and health boards. I'm pleased to say moving forward that'll be much more streamlined, because Public Health Wales have set up their own data set, and the data is much more up to date, and we'll be using that going forward. That's been signed off through the Regional Partnership Board, so that will be the data set that we use going forward with the next population needs assessment that we do. But obviously we're very much base a lot of the things that we do on public engagement as well, and the needs set within our own communities. So when we go out again to do the population needs assessment, we'll be coming to Monmouthshire, and we'll be working with community leads to sort of set up engagement events where we can go to community centres and things to work with the local population to also add to that data. So I hope that sort of makes sense, but I'm happy to link in with anyone outside of the meeting. I can pop my email address in the chat if that's helpful, and happy to go into further detail. Regarding the public service, somebody mentioned about sort of access to equality and justice, and that's missing. We work very closely with the Public Service Board around sort of equality and diversity and equity of provision across Gwent. So I wouldn't be able to answer that question today. I'm afraid that doesn't come under one of the Regional Partnership Board priorities that we take forward, but I think it might come under the Public Service Board. And what we tend to do is, when I write the area plan for Gwent under the Regional Partnership Board, we very much link with the Public Service Board to make sure it's almost hand in glove and it fits together, so that we're not duplicating each other. So if I can pick that up, Chair, outside of the meeting and feed that back through, I'd be very grateful for that. I know that we heavily promote the Disabled Facility Grant, and we've got a health, social care and housing strategic partnership that works on that. But there's probably more that we can do. So I'm very happy to sort of meet up with you to sort of see how we can promote that even further, because we want to reach as many people as possible to make a difference in communities. So if there's something that we're not doing, please get in touch, and I can make sure that we can do more in that area. So I hope that answers some of those areas, Councillor Chandler, or if you wanted me to come in any further.
I think that's good as far as I'm concerned, but certainly we can, people can contact me and I can feed those questions through to you, or they can contact you direct. So I think that will be good. And I think sort of in conversations outside of the chamber, I think probably when we're looking at this next year, we will try and table this through people's scrutiny first before we bring it to full council. I think that might give an opportunity for more detailed questioning as well. So, but we'll talk about that as we get to that at sort of the tail end of this year. So, thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you, Councillor Chandler. The report, we should note and approve this report. I'm wondering if we could do that. I'm going to look for dissent to that as a proposal, rather than go through the whole voting function. So, any dissent to noting and accepting this report? I see none. Noted and accepted. Thank you very much. Item 6.3, the Council Diary. Councillor Sandals.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. This Council is required to agree its schedule of meetings for the year to ensure the relevant governance arrangements are in place for the Council to carry out its functions. A timetable of all Council meetings from May 2025 is attached to this report for approval. As ever, where possible, meetings have not been set in school holidays, as members have requested. This report will not look to review the timings of council meetings, simply that the scheduled dates of meetings for committees is fit for purpose and will ensure good governance arrangements. The timing of council meetings has already been reviewed by this council and its Democratic Services Committee. There will still be opportunity for committees to make alterations to these arrangements in consultation with the committee's chair and its members to suit the needs of the committee and its work programme should it need to. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to make a couple of brief points, if that's okay. Firstly, I'm pleased that the July full council meeting's been reinstated. We were poised to vote against this report if we thought that there was going to be a reduction in the number of full council meetings or a reduction in the number of opportunities for us to come here and raise issues and concerns on behalf of our residents. Another point that I feel I have to raise every year, and I'm getting a bit tired of doing it, is that yet again we see a minority administration that does not have the votes within the coalition to pass a budget, proposing a first vote on the budget plans 3 working days before the legal deadline to set a budget. You're either being incredibly reckless or perhaps you need to be a bit more upfront about agreements you have with others outside of your coalition about how you're going to get that budget passed. So I'd be interested to know which it is. Last year there were a number of meetings that were either moved, cancelled, postponed as a result of the general election, entirely understandable and fair, but there were too many other meetings that were moved outside of that 6-week period. We all want a more diverse council. We want younger members who've got work commitments, members of all ages, including those with caring responsibilities. Members plan their other commitments around their council meetings. So a plea to all chairs of committees to be mindful in the year ahead that changing meetings can be incredibly disruptive. I note that the Public Services Committee was postponed or cancelled on 5 occasions in 2024, and that committee only met on 3 occasions last year. By contrast, Place Scrutiny Committee met 9 times, Performance and Overview 13 times. Cabinet meetings seem to move around all over the place. First they were at 3 p.m, then they were at 5 p.m, now they're at 4:30. Initially the first Wednesday of the month, now they could literally be on any Wednesday. So a plea for consistency and regularity of meetings so that members have ample opportunity to raise concerns and issues that are relevant to their residents. This isn't Handforth Parish Council, this is a unitary authority representing 100,000 people, and we have a budget of nearly £250 million. So this is serious business, and I think it's really important that our proceedings are professional and consistent. So we'll support this vote, but we do want to see higher standards this year, please.
I see no one else indicating they wish to speak. So this is for us to note and approve. Especially given that last contribution, I'm going to again suggest that I look to see this approved by asking for any signs of any dissent, in which case we'd move to a vote. I see no dissent. Okay. So that item is approved. Thank you very much. That takes us on to motions. So we have one motion today submitted by Councillor John. Councillor John.
Thank you very much, Chair. We were disappointed when the Welsh Government settlement was published, again giving Monmouthshire the lowest increase of any council in Wales, just 2.8%. While neighbouring Newport received 5.6%. If Monmouthshire was funded at the same level as mid-table councils like Wrexham, for example, we would have an additional £54 million every year to invest in frontline services. Think of the difference that could make to the social services and education services that we deliver. If we were funded to the same level as the highest funded council in Wales, we would have an additional £98 million every year. Now, a number of better funded councils than Monmouthshire are sat on obscene levels of usable reserves. Rhondda Cynon Taf, £269 million. Caerphilly, £222 million. It's grossly immoral that these councils are putting up taxes on working families while sat on reserves of hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. clearly a far better funded council than Monmouthshire, but I wonder if the administration has picked up any tips from Torvine. I noticed they've finished their financial year with a modest underspend. I know that the Cabinet have been having a number of meetings with the Cabinet in Torvine. We would be interested to see minutes of those meetings to see what's actually been discussed. While we were disappointed by the Welsh Government's settlement, I note that others in this chamber weren't. The leader told the Senedd's Local Government and Housing Committee that she reacted with relief when she saw the settlement. Relief at 2.8%, the worst settlement in Wales. Talk about sending mixed messages to the Welsh Government when we're expecting the administration to be speaking with one voice, working with other councils, saying that we really need that funding floor to be implemented. This motion raises concerns about the administration's capacity to fund essential services in the year ahead, and these worries have been exacerbated by what the administration call their draft budget. Of course, it isn't a budget that you could just pick up and implement tomorrow, because it's got a great big hole in it. It's incomplete. The council has a legal duty to deliver a balanced budget, but this draft budget has a great hole of £3 million in it. It's grossly misleading to present this to the public as a draft budget when you're clearly hiding plans for further council tax increases and service cuts that you're not prepared to consult the public on. You'll present these further cuts and tax rises at the 11th hour, just days before the legal deadline to set a budget, thereby bypassing public engagement and avoiding scrutiny. No scrutiny committee will be able to consider your budget plans as a package, and you're consulting residents on a less drastic fake budget. This consultation should be withdrawn until a complete draft budget can be presented to the public. If you were to apply for a mortgage, you couldn't say to your mortgage advisor that you've got a gap in your affordability criteria and you'll just come up with the figures at some point further down the road. It doesn't stack up. On council tax, you're proposing an increase of 7.8%, coincidentally the same rise you approved last year, more than 3 times the rate of inflation. Not only are residents not seeing similar increases in their income, but they're actually worse off because of decisions made by the UK Labour government, taking pensioners' winter fuel payments away, increasing national insurance on employers, and driving investors and job creators out of the country. Even at 7.8% this year, council tax will have risen in Monmouthshire by over 23% since you came to power in 2022. And what have residents got to show for it? The average Band D property has seen a council tax increase of £428, while the bill for a Band I property has risen by £1,000. These are crippling bills for so many residents, and they're facing these because you can't get a grip on spending or introduce the long-term structural changes that are needed in services and those which you've promised. On the 8th of January, the leader told the Senedd's Local Government and Housing Committee, we are not looking at redundancies, rather cuts to services and higher council tax, and that non-statutory services will fall by the wayside. They have to. Perhaps the Cabinet can tell us today which non-statutory services are going to have to fall by the wayside. You've often said that we need radical change to the council's operating model. But nowhere have we seen the radical change in the way that services are delivered. Instead, here we are about to enter what is hopefully the administration's penultimate year in office, and we haven't seen any structural changes in the way that key services are delivered. Instead, we've seen services salami sliced, borrowing increased, reserves raided, taxes going up, the same old Labour Party, tax, borrow and spend, the recipe that's done so much harm to the UK economy in the last 6 months. You're putting up fees and charges in a really damaging way. Car park charges up by 10%, again deterring shoppers from spending money in our local towns. We see in the Democratic Services Forward plan the threat of you looking to reinstate fees for high street businesses who want to use their frontages. You're projecting to increase leisure income. Will that be through higher charges? Again, we need further information on that. You're cutting the opening hours of community hubs, but refusing to say how. Which hubs and libraries will close when? Perhaps you can tell us today exactly what you're proposing. I noted the promise in Cabinet yesterday that you won't be downgrading any hubs or libraries, and we'll be holding you to that. You need to spell out how this £3 million black hole will be plugged. Last year, you wanted to take £1 million out of the schools budget and were saved by a last-minute injection of cash from the UK government. We already have 22 of the council's 34 schools in a budget deficit and facing the challenge of cutting back on staff and one-to-one support for vulnerable pupils. We haven't heard mention of plans to improve the school estate over and above projects which you inherited from the previous administration, including the 3 to 19 King Henry School, which Labour voted against. The previous Conservative administration had a policy of ring-fencing all capital receipts, money from the sale of assets, for investment in school buildings. Labour has scrapped this and have flogged £13 million of assets to cover day-to-day spending. This means that future investment in school buildings will require further borrowing and even higher borrowing charges. You're proposing to save £100,000 by moving children with additional learning needs currently educated outside of Monmouthshire in maintained and independent specialist placements into MCC provision. Is this being done in the best interest of those children, or is it being done to save money? Residents are also shocked at the plan to close the much-loved Old Station tourist attraction in Tintern as a council service. Tintern Old Station is one of the most popular attractions in the Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty. The Wye Valley tourism industry is already being hit with Labour's 182-day threshold to stay on business rates, Labour's national insurance increases, and Labour's tourism tax potentially on the way. Tintern Old Station helps bring tourists into the area who then spend money in the local pubs and restaurants. Perhaps you can tell us if you've had any discussions yet with potential private operators. I really urge the public to be vocal in sharing their discontent with these lazy and uninspiring proposals. The Cabinet needs to go back to the drawing board and develop a better plan to protect local services and cut back on inefficient spending. So to conclude, I'm grateful to Councillor Neil, who is seconding this motion. This Labour administration's plans are based on higher taxes, more borrowing and questionable spending. I'm disappointed that the Cabinet has chosen to keep residents in the dark about many of its spending.
1 minute.
Okay. About many of its spending plans by publishing a draft budget with a £2.86 million hole, which will need to be plugged by even higher council tax and further cuts to services. So that's why I'm proposing an amendment, which regrets the administration's failure to produce a fully costed draft budget and instructs the Cabinet to withdraw its draft budget from consultation and publish a new comprehensive draft budget setting out its plans in full for 2025-26.
Excuse me, 1 moment.
Chair, may I possibly ask, you didn't ask for a seconder of the motion at the start, and I was just looking to make sure I get the opportunity to do that.
My apologies. And you're down to speak, so you will. Sorry, just in, so you don't amend your own motion, you propose an alteration to it. Now, I'm looking at section 27.18 of the Constitution. You may alter a motion and that the meeting's consent needs to be signified. However, only alterations can be made which do not negate or completely rewrite the original motion, and in my view this does completely rewrite the original motion, so I don't think that doesn't stand as an alteration by the rules. So we proceed with the original motion.
Chair, it wasn't rewriting the motion, it was an additional point at the end of the motion.
It sufficiently changes the motion to not stand as an alteration. So we continue with the original motion. Councillor Neil, I'm sorry, I didn't invite a seconder. Do you wish to speak now or after Councillor Callard?
Now would be good, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, please continue.
And thank you. And if I may say I support this motion, but I feel compelled to start by saying that I'm really shocked that a cabinet member would accuse a member of the public of lying in this chamber alongside accusing a fellow councillor with no opportunity for recourse. And I feel, Chair, that should be called out.
Is this a point of order? Because we are debating this motion.
I feel it should be called out and withdrawn. So I do support this motion. It's essential that this administration gets a grip on the finances of our council, or the future looks very bleak indeed. If we were a business, we'd be heading for bankruptcy. As it is, we seem to be in a doom loop of eye-watering council tax increases, and yet cuts to many of the services that so many residents depend upon. And still, there is an ever-increasing black hole in the council's forward finances. The last 3 years have seen a compound 23% increase in council tax. Many residents will be shocked by this. 23%. Last year and next year, increases at 3 times the CPI rate of inflation. And as Councillor John has pointed out, this results in between £400 to £1,000 increases from Band D through to Band I. And these are levels at which applying further percent increases in the future will see exponential increases. When you apply, if you were to apply a further 7 or 8% in future years to £5,000, it's a very, very much bigger number than if you apply it to the lower number that this administration started at. Residents are going to be shocked. Each year sees major overspends in our services, and these are balanced off by corporate treasury actions. This is simply not sustainable. Residents, they have every right to know that their county council's administration is managing their money responsibly, not simply returning each year to charge enormous council tax increases to cover up for a lack of effective spending control and cost control. Each year we see the services overspending whilst falling well short of their forecast savings. The coming year looks no different, with projected savings in adult social care and children's services that do not look credible. These service overspends are now described as carrying through, quotes, to 2025-2026, as if this were just an accounting treatment. It is not. It means that each year, and this year again, the administration fails to control spend and costs, and the task becomes greater each year, stumbling forward year by year as if in the dark. There is no forward view of what the council will look like next year or in the year after. Residents have a right to know this, not just projected numbers with an enormous black hole, but what will their services look like if we carry on like this? For residents, the forecast black hole of £35 million will point to one thing, and one thing only: yet more colossal council tax increases ahead and further borrowing. The draft budget describes the prospect of a multi-year settlement. How on earth can this be realistic with the Senate elections next year, when it would take a brave, or perhaps a foolish person, to predict the makeup of the Welsh Government at that point. I note the change in language around resources and reserves. Reserves have previously been described in terms of reserves will not be used for recurrent revenue expenditure. That is now described in terms of avoiding dependency on the use of reserves, a quite different matter. That doesn't look like an accidental change in words, but rather a recognition that there's still anticipated overspending in coming years, so reserves will yet again be used to offset it. When we run out of usable reserves, there will be nowhere to hide. You must get spending and costs under control. Whilst the overall budget proposes increases from £220 million to £238 million, an 8% increase, there still remains a gap, as Councillor John has pointed out, of nearly £3 million. That is not acceptable. We should be consulting on the whole budget, not just most of it. And £14 million in pressures, which you say you will have to be met by service efficiencies, service reductions and council tax increases. Businesses have to deal with cost pressures every year. They don't have the luxury of just passing on 3 times inflationary increases. They organise their businesses differently. They improve their systems. They reform how they work to manage those pressures. You must do the same. Despite those huge tax increases, borrowing still increases by 14%. And there is more planned, as Highways borrows from the Welsh Government, all of which has to be repaid. So this is tax, borrow and spend, a very familiar drumbeat on the backs of our residents. Finally, may I make the point that there is a £100,000 cut in cybersecurity insurance, alongside a cut in vital officer oversight of cybersecurity. We must be very careful indeed with the data we hold of tens of thousands of residents. There is no evident investment in this area, just these 2 cuts. Our residents will want to be reassured that their data, their personal data, is safe. Thank you. I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I really don't know where to start with that lot, to be honest. There's quite a lot of inaccuracies in both of those speeches. I'll try and cover some of them off. But, I mean, initially, Councillor John, I tell you, if you were disappointed in the settlement we got from Welsh Government, you would have been absolutely shocked to consider what we were going to get from the Conservative Government before then.
We're not funded by Conservative Government. We're funded by Welsh Government.
The funding that came to Welsh Government from the Westminster Government, we were looking in the previous Conservative administration in Westminster, there was going to be a 0% uplift in our spending. So while we can be disappointed that...
Sorry, can I have quiet in the chamber and respect to the person who's speaking, please?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking, Councillor John, so please afford me the same courtesy. I'd like to go back to the wording of the motion, though, because there are quite a few inaccuracies in it, and I'd like to correct them if that's possible. Firstly, and you know, I'm not trying to defend our settlement here. You know, we're negotiating for a higher settlement, but we're not the lowest funded council in Wales. We're certainly one of the lowest, and we are the lowest per capita. But the statement you made in the motion is factually incorrect. And really, it took me 2 minutes on Google to check that. So, pretty poor work, I'd say. Next, I'll pick you up on your assertion that we're still forecasting an in-year... I'm sorry, Chair, all I can hear is talking over when I'm speaking.
Can I have quiet in the chamber, please, and listen to the person speaking? If you're not listening to the person speaking, you may not be entitled to vote on the motion.
Sorry, it's just very rude. I'd like to pick you up on your assertion that we're still forecasting an in-year overspend of £5 million and a 5-year forecasted £35 million shortfall. We're not still forecasting a £5 million in-year overspend. We reported at the last update to Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee that budget recovery action would bring this down to around £3.3 million, and since then we've received additional in-year funding from the Welsh Government. You'll also be aware that our recently published draft budget proposals result in a significant reduction in the shortfall forecast in our medium-term financial strategy. You could have checked your numbers with a short call or email to our finance team, but seems you couldn't be bothered. On your last point of instructing the administration to urgently bring forward radical change to the authority, we've been changing the way the authority operates for the last 2 years. Just yesterday in Cabinet, you were there. We made a decision to purchase another house to bring more of our children's services back in-house, the third such purchase we've made. Now, you might respond that I'm splitting hairs or that your broader points stand, but I believe that getting the details right matters, and I believe that's especially true when it comes to financial matters. I could sit here and I could propose amendments to each of these errors, but I think this motion is probably so bad that it's beyond redemption. Its only redeeming feature is that it sheds some light on your attitude to detail and making sure you've got the facts right, and I hope the public take note of this. Councillors, I don't mind if you vote to support this toothless motion or not, but I won't be. The council could pass a motion saying the sky is green, but it wouldn't make it true. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And next to speak is Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thank you. I also have a fairly unimpressed with this motion, and you know, I do wonder, you know, particularly the last part of the motion, I do wonder if Councillor John doesn't bother to read the reports that we share, or whether he merely sleeps through the meetings that we hold. But I do find the instruction in this motion for the administration to bring forward radical changes to the council's operating model sadly misinformed, if not bizarre. As members are fully aware, within my own portfolio of social care, in the last 2 years, we've made a number of radical changes, and I'll just give you a few examples. So in adult social care, we've established the Quality and Learning Group to increase management oversight and to support the staff who are undertaking care assessments. The outcome of this is to improve the quality and consistency of the care and support plans that are agreed, and so manage our costs. We have developed and are in the process of implementing a new domiciliary care commissioning strategy. This means we'll be entering into block contracts for care providers, giving them more security and better ability to plan and recruit staff. It may help to reduce travel time for care workers moving from home to home and reduce the carbon footprint of the service. And it should also help us to redeploy some of our in-house team to work more on short-term reablement and prevention work instead of long-term care. And we've also implemented the recommendations of the independent review into My Day, My Life and developed that service. In children's services, some examples there. In addition to fulfilling all of our statutory duties on providing care and support and safeguarding our vulnerable children, we continue to invest in family support services to keep children safe and prevent the need for children to come into our care. As Councillor Callar just said, we are delivering at pace our radical new policy on developing in-house residential placements for looked after children and those leaving care at 16, which provides better and more local care, improves outcomes for the children and young people in the homes, and saves considerable sums of money from the use of private providers. And we're also investing to retain and recruit more in-house foster carers, again to improve outcomes and save funds from the use of commercial fostering agencies. And this includes a provision in the budget proposals that you were just talking about, that we have just published, to significantly increase the fees and allowances we pay our in-house foster carers, in some cases nearly doubling the current amounts. And this is on top of the council tax reduction scheme that we adopted last year. These are a number of radical changes, and I could give you several more examples, but I don't want to waste the time on this. I just found it's a fairly uninformed motion, and it is a credit to all of our excellent and dedicated staff team that we're delivering all of these radical reforms while also dealing with intense operational pressures and uncertainty. And I can only apologise to our staff team for the misinformation and criticism they're getting from the people opposite.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, I haven't criticised officers working for this council. That's just not true.
Thank you. Next to speak is Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'm really disappointed that the old station Tinton has been picked out as a budget recovery option. Those members that have visited this site will understand my concerns. This is a hidden gem in the Wye Valley, a peaceful haven. As you will have expected, there is interest from locals and users of the site, mainly who support strongly that the running should be firmly in the hands of Monmouthshire County Council. There are also suggestions that the signal box should be open for special events. I appreciate that this is disability access is a problem, but such events as fetes, music, weekends, etc., etc. An options appraisal is to be carried out, which rules nothing out or nothing in. The current in-house model is, I feel, the best option. Over the past 2 years, together with grant aid, the carriages have been refurbished with new interpretation panels, investment in a new miniature train, accessible carriage, and new track, 2 shower box, 2 electric car charging points, solar panels on the carriages. The old station is a brilliant attraction which should achieve a much greater footfall, especially if an operation could be made all year round, if it could be operated all year round. Let's all be proud of this place. It's unique. There are difficult decisions to be made, I appreciate, but please, let's look again, referencing customers, culture, community and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. As many of you know, I'm well into my 80s, I'm 87. I would like to think that now I could be a proper retired person. There are many people like me in my age group who made provision. If you're self-employed, you've got to make your own provision. So we made provision to have an extra pension from a firm, I mustn't say the firm, so that we would have enough money to live on for the rest of our days. If you keep putting up the council tax like this, it's going to make things even worse. I can't afford to be properly retired. I've got to work, because that's the only way I can stay in my house. And I'm not the only person. So by putting up the council tax, as you're doing, because you haven't run your business properly, and I ran a business for many years, and I was never in the red at all through the business. It was a small business, but we were the 11th highest supplier of organ chain in the country. So I do know about running businesses. And to see that there were so many people were in the same position as me, wondering whether they can stay in their houses because the council tax has gone up so much. You want to get your business right, you want to make it work, and you want to make money, not just spend it. Make it so you've got it to spend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Griffiths.
Thanks very much. Initially, I just want to focus on the proposition in the motion that this council regrets that Monmouthshire is the lowest funded council in Wales. As Councillor Callard pointed out, if you do it in simple gross amounts, that's not true. You could take a smaller council in Wales and you'd find it had less money in grant than Monmouthshire does. But what is true, and it is significant, is that it is the lowest funded per capita council in Wales. And consistently, and it's what I enjoy coming to council and I enjoy the company of so many colleagues, but the expression of what I've come to regard as synthetic indignation it does get tedious. The indignation based, I call it synthetic because there's a full understanding that it could be no other than what it is. Monmouthshire was the lowest funded council per capita in Wales when Nicholas Edwards, Conservative minister, who I admired at the time and have grown to admire even more looking back, introduced the formula. It was the lowest funded council then because the formula is an equalisation formula. It aims to equalise the spending of different authorities which have different levels of tax, different tax bases. Monmouthshire has the highest income per capita in Wales and has since the 1980s, and as a result has the highest property values within Wales. It has the highest tax base, and the grant seeks to equalise that. It did it in the 1980s. The formula was considered at the time of local government reorganisation. Secretaries of State, John Redwood, Haig, both looked at the formula, decided that it should be applied to the 22 unitary authorities, and lo and behold, per capita, Monmouthshire remained at the bottom grant per head in Wales. Colleagues on the council with this synthetic indignation want to say to the people of Monmouthshire that this is some sort of Labour plot by a Labour Welsh government. It is not so. The formula has been with us for well nigh 4 decades now, under successive Conservative administrations before the Welsh Government, and always for the good reasons of equalising on the basis of the tax base. Monmouthshire is at the bottom. Can we please recognise the reality of that? My second point, again, the indignation, the synthetic indignation that the proposals that are going out for consultation have, and the reference is there in the motion, to a funding gap of not 3 million as claimed, but 2.8 million to be accurate. What is there is a very reasonable, sensible recognition that at all times a budget is a process of balancing very many moving parts. They move throughout the budget preparation process. They'll continue to move over the next few weeks, and indeed they will move throughout the budget implementation process next year. Always, there are continuing changes in revenue, continuing changes in costs, in demand for services. As we put this budget to consultation, we know that there are unknowns. We know that we are working with a draft local government settlement which will have introduced not just potential changes in the total amount, but will have introduced a funding floor. What is not known is the extent of that floor. We know that there are a wide range of decisions to be made by Welsh Government on very important specific grants. Now, in proposing this budget, we could consult on the worst case scenario. That would mean that we'd be putting to the public a picture of service cuts and service changes, which everyone in this chamber would know would not actually be implemented because the moving parts will continue to move. That would not be responsible. Instead, what we've done is made a reasoned judgment about how those cogs will align, how that gap will be filled, and we've made proposals for consultation on how expenditure levels can meet the most likely, not certain, but the most likely level of funding. That, I suggest, is a reasonable and sensible approach and does not deserve the synthetic indignation that it has received in this debate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the Council. While I appreciate the concerns raised in this motion, I am unable to support it as it risks dividing the Council when we need to work together to address these challenges. While Monmouthshire's funding situation is frustrating, and as we have already heard, this is a long-standing issue tied to the way funding is allocated across Wales. We should, however, focus on how we as a council can make the strongest case for a fairer funding and work together to secure the resources that we need. The proposed rise in council tax is not what any of us want. However, this is a result of difficult decisions in very tough financial climate. Costs are increasing and demand for services are rising. I would ask any of those supporting this motion to consider what is the alternative. Which services would they propose to cut? Social care, schools, road repairs? These are difficult questions, but they are ones that we must answer together, not in opposition. We all agree that change is needed, and as we have heard, this administration is already working on the radical change mentioned in the motion. We should focus on supporting these efforts and ensuring the changes we make are carefully planned to protect the essential services our residents rely on. And let us not forget the hard work of our staff, who are doing their best under difficult circumstances. I cannot see how this motion helps with staff morale. What I find missing in this motion is a spirit of collaboration. It highlights the problems that we all know exist, but doesn't suggest how we as a council can tackle them together. These challenges are not owned by one administration or party. They are a collective responsibility. By working together, we can navigate these difficulties more effectively and with less disruption to the people we serve. In summary, while I share some of the concerns raised, this motion does not reflect the cooperative approach we need. I will not be supporting this motion and ask members to commit to working together, as we so often do at scrutiny meetings, to find solutions that will protect our services, support our residents and secure the best possible future for Monmouthshire. Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wasn't intending to say anything in this debate, but I thank Councillor Griffiths for the history lesson that he gave. However, you know, for decades we've had a Labour government, Labour Welsh government, who, bearing in mind that this revenue grant support grant has always been unfair, particularly to rural authorities and in particular to Monmouthshire. Obviously in the last administration, you know, we were campaigning to ask for this revenue support grant to be changed. It still hasn't changed. And although Councillor Griffiths made the point about the fact that, you know, some councils have different council tax bands and therefore council tax properties, we used to receive in the last administration details of how in the budget, even though there were differences in council tax bands, Monmouthshire still received the lowest per capita funding, and we're not getting that information anymore. And I think it's useful for us to have that to show that we are still the lowest funded. And although this, I think it's important that we do actually regret the fact that we continue to be the lowest funded. And I also think it's very unfair that because of this revenue grant support and the way it's worked out, that local authorities with high levels of reserves still end up getting a higher percentage increase than we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sandals.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. In response, briefly, just to Councillor Webb's statement, Old Tinton Station will be subject to an options appraisal this year. No changes will happen this year. We are aware of what a fabulous and much-loved attraction it is, and we will ensure that the options appraisal does exactly what it says on the tin, explore all the options. To this end, we're currently starting to recruit staff. Councillor John asked a question in Cabinet yesterday, how many Cabinet members have visited Old Tinton Station? The answer was as expected, and we all giggled. Every single one of us, and I'm sure every single member, well, I hope every single member in this chamber holds it dear and has visited and will continue to visit and support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pavia.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak in this motion. I'm only going to make a short contribution on a couple of specific areas. And using a Rumsfeldism, and I think Councillor Griffiths reflected that in his contribution, there are a number of key known unknowns in relation to this budget. Firstly, the Welsh Government will implement a budget floor, but we don't know what our allocation would be, but it will close the budget gap. And secondly, that there is an expectation that UK government will pass down funds to the Welsh government to cover the increase in the National Insurance Employers contribution, but we don't know how much it will be passported and whether it will extend to cover the costs for commissioned providers. And just on the second point, I think in my view, the UK government's proposal to increase national insurance contributions appears to be inadequately considered. The potential implications for local government, not just this council, but for local government across Wales and the UK, and their commission providers that help us deliver key frontline public services do not seem to be fully assessed, particularly concerning that the possible negative implications if some of those commissioned providers either withdraw the services or have to fold as going concerns. So I think the lack of clarity from the UK government, in my view, is a real concern. And I'm confident that the leader will provide a contribution to this debate shortly. I know she likes jousting with Councillor John, but I would like to request from her to reflect on the assurances that have been provided to her by Welsh Government and by her colleagues from Westminster, and to offer her perspective on the likelihood of these two lots of funds being secured. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I had hoped to get to the end of this debate before we broke, but I'm getting various people wiggling their fingers at me and messaging me. So I'm going to propose a short, I'm very sorry, but I'm also seeing the list of speakers extending. So I'm going to suggest a 8-minute break. Let's get back, if we can, for 22, so we don't lose the thread of this. So 22, please. Hello again. I think we're quorate and we're late back. So we are now quorate. We are now quorate. Oh, and I've lost my list. I believe Councillor Butler was next to speak. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting this motion because of genuine concerns about this budget. I'm particularly concerned about further rises in council tax for our residents in a climate of real uncertainty and worry, particularly for rural residents who tend to live in higher value houses, such as Monmouthshire farmhouses, and often have lower incomes. The proposed 7.8% hike could be misleading, and I have concerns that an even higher raise is being considered. The level of uncertainty regarding the final budget that will hit Monmouthshire residents means that to present it with little chance to amend it or raise our concerns is extremely troubling. I have to confess, I did think about raising a point of order at the personal, insulting comments levelled at Councillor John by Councillor Callard and Councillor Chandler. The arrogance displayed at another point of view was shocking to my ears. I may disagree with Councillor Griffiths on many points, although I have to say I do agree with him about Nicholas Edwards, and his producing the Welsh Development Agency was a great boon to Wales. But he was civilised in his comments, and I don't see any reason why anyone else can't be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that none of us would want to increase council tax more than is absolutely necessary and to load it on hard-working and struggling families, or indeed to be looking at cutting services. But this is another very challenging budget, and I think we have to look at what we inherited. Uncontrolled costs of homelessness, for instance, due to a long failure to invest in social housing, and an underinvestment in our road infrastructure, where we're now seeing the consequences. But quite apart from the demands on services that have come about through austerity, through an economic failure at Westminster, and obviously the effects of the pandemic. So there are great challenges, and we are making radical and rapid change, for instance, in the effect of homelessness, moving people out of bed and breakfast, providing a better service at a lower cost. And that's what we're seeking to do all over, and I think we can see great examples of it in many areas of the council. But there are also services where, when we protect the essential services, there are other services where we have to look at whether there is another operating model for them, as we are doing at the Old Station, Tintern, as we are doing with the Borough Theatre. Other ways where we can keep that vibrant community facility that is so important to our residents, but do it at a lower cost to council taxpayers. So I think we have to celebrate that we are actually looking to increase the investment in housing, in social care and education. And it is right, I think, that we look at every area of cost for the council and where a different operating model can reduce those costs. Because we do need to, whilst all of us, I think, would want to see more money going into rural services, we have to operate within the situation we are. And what I've heard from members opposite is a regret for any service cuts, a regret for any money savings, but also a regret for increases in council tax. I can't quite see how you balance without one against the other.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. And members will recall that in the very first few months of this council, the independent group put forward a motion to ask the administration to write to Welsh Government. I don't want to get into a debate about the funding formula and the way it works, and appreciate Councillor Griffiths' description of how it is intended to create a degree of fairness. However, we know what it doesn't account for is the cost of delivering services in a largely rural authority. It does not account for that, and that is the element that we had asked this council, this administration, to deal with from the very outset. Now, we made that request, and I understand, and I know that there was a letter written. However, we are being assured that there are a number of conversations ongoing. However, we cannot take things on faith and trust, I think, alone. We are charged with scrutinising the budget, scrutinising the administration, and ensuring that there is an appropriate and proper trail of the decisions that this council makes. So there's been a lot of criticism about what people say, and I have to say, as you know, I'm really not keen on overly politicising things, but we do get that sort of table tennis back and forth, to be expected. It's part of what happens here. But it is true to say that Monmouthshire received only a 2.6% increase in funding, which is the lowest in Wales, as I understand it. And that has definitely, as set out in the letter to Welsh Government, exacerbated some of the issues that this council faces in funding matters. Monmouthshire also relies on council tax more than any other authority, and we understand, thanks to Councillor Griffiths' dialogue, why that is. However, I don't think it's good enough that we are still facing a £2.9 million gap. I don't think it's good enough that we don't understand the detail of what that could look like. So there are options on the table, and I know Councillor Khaled last night talked about receiving, I think he described it as a positive approach from Welsh Government to the introduction of potential funding floors or other funding mechanisms which would assist the council in meeting that budget gap. But the fact remains, we don't know what that is. We don't know what that looks like. And of course, one hopes that there isn't a need to make further cuts to services. But to be perfectly honest, I'm not clear about what exactly the cuts we are looking to make are. For example, if you take, I'll just pick one out at random, social care and health fees, 366,000. I don't know exactly what that means just yet, and I don't, and of course we haven't got the opportunity to understand it. And I think it is important that we understand the detail of the budget and we understand what those conversations look like. So I would have certainly preferred to have understood in much more detail, rather than, and I don't dispute that is ongoing, but it's not good enough for us to make decisions on. In the interim, I don't feel that, we've seen what I would consider to be some ill-judged decisions in previous budgets, and we still have very difficult budgets. I don't doubt that staff haven't worked exceptionally hard to come up with where we are now, but we are in the position where we have to make all our decisions based on the very best information. So I would agree that it would be much more satisfactory to understand the detail of what do we do if that doesn't happen? What do we do if there is still a gap between a funding floor, another mechanism, and the required budget? I don't think it's acceptable to try and then consult with people last minute. I know Councillor Khaled gave an assurance that would happen, but and forgive me, but my faith in the consultation processes to date are not that great. So I think that I would be particularly concerned about that. And so I understand, if you like, why Councillor John has brought this. And for me, it's not about, trying to, it's really very much about saying we need the best information. We need to make decisions based on the facts and how it affects residents. And I understand that sometimes we'll need a larger council tax, but, those decisions could have been, we used reserves. We're now looking at capitalising, not capitalising, what do? We have a capital receipt and we use it to fund transformation or whatever the proper term is. But then that's still not available for the things that we needed to be available to. These are difficult decisions and they need not to be taken lightly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brocklesby.
Thank you, Chair. I will largely keep my remarks focused on the dynamics of the budget process and the negotiations that are going on with the Welsh Government. I appreciate, though, the contributions from my group, particularly Cabinet members who've come in, because their competence, their incisiveness and their commitment to show how we have built the budget, particularly from Councillor Callard, I think lays down very clearly that this is a budget with purpose, that this is a budget with ensuring that under the current climate facing the whole of the UK, after 14 years of, quite frankly, contempt for local government and cut after cut across our local authorities, that we have found a way to protect our key services and that we will protect our environment and the people who are most disadvantaged and vulnerable. And that has always been our focus and our priority. And that, Councillor John, is why I showed relief, because back in spring, under the budget of the previous Chancellor, Wales and the rest of the UK for local government was looking at a 0% increase. We were looking at, yet again, a sustained attack on local and public services. To have a change of government, and a government which has showed, despite the economic climate and despite the black hole that was inherited, that they would find ways to protect public services and look for multi-year settlements, and they have committed to that next year, which will have consequences for Welsh Government, regardless of who is in power in 2026, was a relief. I'm not going to be naive here and suggest that we weren't disappointed by the settlement, but we were able to enter immediately into negotiations through the WLGA and on our own behalf. And we have worked tirelessly to ensure that our issues as a council and our issues as those councils, largely rural councils, but not all, are understood by the Welsh Government, are understood by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, as well as the Cabinet Secretary for Housing and Local Government, and that they have, and I have absolute confidence that they have accepted those arguments, and there will be extra resources, known as the floor in this case, coming into local government, and it will positively impact Monmouthshire. And I will continue to make that case wherever I can make it on behalf of this council. We are also, as both Councillor Callard and Councillor Griffiths pointed out, we are also waiting for, I've forgotten the word, the grants that we expect to change. Specific grants, thank you. For the specific grants, which will also, particularly I think with regard to social care, and that is no secret, of how that will impact on the council. I I don't need to tell either Councillor Neil or Councillor John that if money comes in that allows you then to use money that you have already put aside for X, you can then place it in X and move that money out to cover other areas. And that's the dynamism. Well, I don't know about a history lesson, but after that motion, I wonder whether you need an economics lesson, Councillor John. But nevertheless, you can move it elsewhere. And we are still waiting to do that. With regards to the process and the amount of information that is given, I do appreciate, Councillor Taylor, that since the budget was published yesterday, that you will not have had time to peruse all the documents. And that may be true for some of our residents, and that's why we're having a consultation period, and there is the detail below the headlines. And Councillor Callard, other Cabinet members, will be talking to a whole range of groups of residents, as well as our survey, and I will have a plug here. Let's Talk Monmouthshire has just been launched to allow that survey to really reach online as many people as possible. And I would encourage everybody in this chamber to sign up, but also encourage your residents, as I am encouraging now our residents to sign up. Let's keep Talk Monmouthshire and make your views known. That's hugely important. I will end by saying that when we come to March the 6th, I am absolutely confident we will have a balanced budget to put before Council and to put before our residents. And I'm absolutely certain that we will have a balanced budget of which we will have the professionalism, the competence, and I think pride in the fact that we have stayed true to our principles in the really challenging times and strengthened the foundations of what are the priorities of this administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I see no further hands up to speak, so I'll... sorry, Councillor Groocourt.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say a few words, not to detain members for very much longer. To start with, in his opening remarks, Councillor John was talking about a budget which has been around for all of a day now, and suggesting that members on this side of the House would be almost nervous of it because we know that it could fall apart very, very easily. But then when he launched the ill-judged attempts to amend his own motion, it'll be interesting to play back the tape, because I'm convinced that I heard Councillor Neil saying that this motion should be withdrawn. And, you know, when Councillor Neil speaks, and we listen very, very carefully. And I think that for those of us who have, I'd like to think, pretty sharp hearing, if you concentrate hard, in the distance there is just the hint of the swirl of the pipes. And I think I heard that this afternoon. This is my second term as a member of this council, and I make no bones of the fact that I am very proud of that. As a citizen of Monmouthshire, I do take great pride in having represented my ward over these years. And mention of Tinton Old Station, and yet the most important thing has yet to be mentioned. And I know that Councillor John, on a good few occasions, has risen to the bait of referring to those infamous short videos that members of the cabinet made, and I think in particular my admission that I was rather partial to a pint or two of good ale. And I wonder how many members here have been to the Kingston Brewery, which is by the station, an excellent local brewery that makes some outstanding beers, and I would encourage all our members to go. And if I'm there, who knows? It's unlikely, but I might even buy them a pint. There has been talk about doing things differently in this administration. Let me highlight one thing in my own portfolio that we've accomplished this year, and that is the very close link that we developed with the Autism Education Trust. And we are the first authority in the whole of Wales to do that. We have said that one of our fundamental values is that we will go out of our way to support the vulnerable and the disadvantaged. And if you know youngsters with autism, if you've been watching the outstanding drama on television this week called Patience, I think it's on Channel 4. It's on most nights, but I would recommend people look to it when a young adult woman with quite severe autism outwits the police at every turn.
Councillor,
it's a joy to watch.
Councillor, can I invite you to stick to the motion, please?
I would like to challenge Councillor John. I think it was 2017 I was first elected, and when we get to this debate every year, I wonder if Councillor John could name a single year when there were not significant cuts to school budgets. And I can certainly remember one year when the scheme of delegation was because the funding was so tight, it was really very difficult to provide schools with the funding to which they were entitled under the delegation scheme that we operate. It seems to me that every year we have hit schools in their budgets. And it was a wonderful morning this morning. Councillor Callard and Will McLean and myself were in this chamber with the vast majority of our head teachers. And when Councillor Callard shared with them an uplift of 10.7% in their budgets, you know, most of them seem to have a smile on their face, which I find difficult to understand, really. But it was a very, very different picture from the one that I'm afraid you tried to point to how we feel. I have to say that talking quite directly of Councillor Callard sat behind me, I have total faith in Councillor Callard. He gives me nothing but confidence in his ability to get a successful budget through in this year's round, and it's a pleasure to serve in a cabinet with him. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. That does bring us to the end of anyone who had their hand up, so I'd invite Councillor John to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. I hope someone's going to play their tape back and put that clip on the internet of Councillor Groker offering to buy everyone a pint. I haven't watched the TV programme he referred to, but I have been watching The Traitors. It's a programme about a group of 22 slightly dysfunctional individuals who come together as complete strangers, have a series of tasks that they have to undertake. They bungled most of them, and then they gradually reduce in number, which seems to be happening here. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to the discussion. I don't accept some of the criticisms that have come from the other side. It is clearly recognised that Monmouthshire is the worst funded council in the whole of Wales. It is not a meaningful comparison to compare Monmouthshire with Cardiff, which has more than 3 times the population as a capital city, or Merthyr Tydfil or Blaenau Gwent, which have a considerably smaller, I think Merthyr Tydfil's got about half the population of Monmouthshire, I think somewhere between 50 and 60,000. I also don't accept this criticism that it's somehow the previous UK Conservative government that was to blame for the lack of investment in local government in Wales. I remember the Welsh Government sending back, was it £150 million they gave back to the Treasury last year because they were too incompetent to spend it by the deadline. That could easily have been, they couldn't spend it, but they could have given it to local authorities who can hold reserves and could have spent that money. Welsh Government also have their own taxation powers. So if they felt that the UK Government wasn't taxing enough, wasn't spending enough, they could have raised taxes themselves to increase the amount of money they had to put into local government. And I also don't accept the point that if we're criticising something the administration has done, we are therefore criticising the officers. We've worked with the officers of this council for longer than you have. I know how exceptionally talented and hard-working they are. We were really proud, and we still are proud, to work with the officers employed by this authority. We are disappointed at the lack of political leadership in this organisation. That is not criticism of the people who are employed by Monmouthshire County Council. Now, I heard the point from the leader about the funding floor, and we absolutely agree. We want the highest possible funding floor that we can get from Welsh Government. On that, I think we're agreed. But we do want to see the Council making more robust, the Cabinet members in particular, making more robust representations to Welsh Government about the difference that will make to the services that our residents receive. I still think it is really disappointing that we have a £2.86 million hole in this budget. I don't think it is fair to the residents of this county that we're putting before them a budget that is not credible, is not balanced. The leader said on the 6th of March we will see the competence and professionalism of a balanced budget. We don't see that today because it's not a balanced budget. This is not a credible budget that you could implement tomorrow because it's got that hole of nearly £3 million in it. Councillor Griffiths explained that it would be wrong of the council to offer the public a worst case scenario, to offer them a series of cuts that may not end up being made. But you're doing the exact, you're doing the same thing. You're giving people a misleading impression of what the final budget will look like. Because you're suggesting the picture is much rosier than it actually is, because you have no way of offering any assurance that that £2.86 million can be covered. So I'm disappointed with some of the responses we've heard today. We hope that Welsh Government will introduce a funding floor. We hope that you are having these conversations with similarly poorly funded councils in Wales because our residents deserve better. So I'm really disappointed that we have this really poor settlement, we have a budget that is not fit for purpose, and I hope the public will fully engage in this consultation and make their objections clear, because this budget is not good enough.
Thank you. That concludes the debate, and we'll now proceed to the vote on the motion. If we can have the voting function, please.
Point of order, please, Chair. Sure. Under point 27.27.4, can I ask for a recorded vote, please?
Do we have 9 supporters? We do. Recorded vote it is.
Okay, Councillor Bond.
Against.
Councillor Brocklesby.
Against.
Councillor Bromfield.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Bryn.
For.
Councillor Buckler?
For.
Councillor Birch?
Against.
Councillor Butler?
For.
Councillor Callard?
Against.
Councillor Chandler?
Against.
Councillor Crook?
Against.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Dimmock?
For.
Councillor Eason?
Against.
Councillor Edwards?
For.
Councillor Garrett?
Against.
Councillor Garrick?
Against.
Councillor Griffiths?
Against.
Councillor Grocott?
Against.
Councillor Howarth?
For.
Councillor Howells?
Against.
Councillor John?
For.
Councillor David Jones?
For.
Councillor Penny Jones?
For.
Councillor Keir?
For.
Councillor Lane?
For.
Councillor Lucas?
For.
Councillor Maybe?
Against.
Councillor McConnell?
Against.
Councillor McKenna?
For.
Councillor Murphy?
For.
Yeah. And you've also got a fuel tank as well. Right. It is.
Councillor Neal?
For.
Councillor Newell?
For.
Councillor Pavia?
For.
Councillor Powell?
For.
Right. Councillor Rook?
Against.
Councillor Sandals?
Against.
Councillor Jackie Strong?
Against.
Councillor Peter Strong?
Against.
Councillor Taylor?
For.
Councillor Thomas?
Against.
Councillor Webb?
This is obviously your earlier clockwork stuff, which would always tin pipe material there. The toys, Play One Commission.
Councillor Webb?
I don't really like it. It needs some.
Councillor Wright?
Against.
Okay. Yeah.
The motion is carried 23 votes to 20. Thank you. That brings us on to our next item of business, which is members' questions. And 8.1 is a question from Councillor Wright to Councillor Chandler. Councillor Wright.
Sorry, bear with me just a second. Thank you. Brew Monday is this month, which encourages us all to catch up and connect with others to support our mental health. Will the Cabinet member please tell us what MCC is doing to support mental health and wellbeing for our residents, council staff and elected members?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the question and for highlighting the importance of nurturing our mental health, especially at this time of year when many of us can find things more challenging. But in answering your question, I do want to acknowledge that good mental health and well-being will mean different things to different people. But however, some of the building blocks to positive mental health and well-being is likely to include, likely to include meaningful connection with people, doing things that you enjoy and particularly giving back to others in the process, as well as staying as active as possible and keeping on learning and staying connected with nature, which obviously is a big thing for me too. As a council, we aim to ensure that people get good advice early on about how to maintain good mental health and physical health and to reduce loneliness and isolation. Our community development teams work closely with the third sector to ensure that there is a vibrant community-based wellbeing offer across the county. We have community-based links workers in our community hubs and based in GP surgeries, and they help those who are more vulnerable to access community support services that are right for them and which support their mental health and well-being. For example, the Lunch Club at the Bridges Centre in Monmouth, Growing Spaces in the Mardy Park Centre, and the Blokes Breakfast Club that operates in Caldicott. We also have always had a commitment to supporting volunteering in this council, and our Be Community service ensures that there is a range of different volunteering opportunities on offer. Because volunteering is shown to be one of the best ways of maintaining positive well-being and helping others in the process. So again, our Bridges Community Driver Scheme and our befriending services are good examples of this. Recently, we've started bringing together community-based groups and services to have community conversations. This is a way of ensuring that the most vulnerable amongst us, and particularly those who may be heading towards needing more formal care and support, are proactively linked up with community-based services, helping them to find real connection, purpose and support to maintain their sense of well-being and independence in a more sustainable real-life way. But I want members to be aware that supporting the wellbeing of residents is a cross-directorate endeavour. Although I'm answering this question in my role as Cabinet Member for Accessible Health Services, it could easily have been other Cabinet members taking this forward, in particular Councillor Sandals. So, for example, leisure, youth, cultural and heritage services all play a vital role in promoting and enabling positive mental health and wellbeing. Each of those services has many examples of the positive outcomes and continuing support they provide, and I have a few quotes. So a quote from a resident accessing one of our leisure centres. They said, "I've been a member for some time now, and after having COVID, I really struggled to keep my balance. Staff went above and beyond to look after me and my well-being, and I'm forever grateful. I now do aqua weekly, and my health and well-being is much better, thanks to the centre, thanks to Mon Life." And again, from Libraries, Learning and Countryside, for quotes, one quote, "It helped me to gain confidence and stop me feeling lonely at home." Another said, "I got something to get out of bed for." And a third said, "I have experienced a reduction in anxiety and increased confidence and learning to be more creative." In terms of our youth service, 95% of young people who engaged in the SHIFT project run by the youth service in our secondary schools perceived an improvement in their mental health and emotional well-being. And feedback from those involved with one young person shows the importance of having this right support in place. They said, "The impact on M was considerable. She said that the sessions definitely helped and that they've helped me to move on from stuff that's brought me down. They've helped me focus on other things other than being down. Talking things through helped a lot." In terms of wellbeing support for the workforce, this is a core priority for the Council. We recognise that public service can have its toll on people, and of course colleagues are affected by the same life pressures and issues as everyone else. So the Council's hubs and people hubs signpost to financial and emotional wellbeing information and to the support that's available in terms of Connect 5 and Mello. Mello is also available to residents. There's a go-to group made up of a diverse group of individuals across Monmouthshire to help support colleagues' wellbeing at work. We run a menopause cafe to provide peer support, and then staff and elected members can access wellbeing support through the Occupational Health and Philips Wellbeing Service and through our links with Benedon Health. So, in conclusion, Councillor, we know that January can be a hard time of year, and so to help, we issued a specific comms directing people to support on Brew Monday that you referred to in the question, highlighting what support is available. And I urge people, if they need that support, to access it forthwith. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you for that, Councillor Chandler. And, you know, it is encouraging to hear about all this stuff that's going on. But there is always room for improvement in everything. And I wonder whether you're aware that the Centre for Mental Health has hosted the Local Government Mental Health Challenge for over a decade. And in 2023, they launched the Mentally Healthier Councils Network. So far, this has become active across all 9 regions in England, but I believe it's yet to become active in Wales. So I wonder whether you could commit firstly to looking into whether this is something that Monmouthshire County Council could become involved with, or whether there's a similar scheme for councils, local authorities in South East Wales. And secondly, I wonder whether you could ask for expressions of interest from elected members as to whether we might like to appoint a mental health champion in the future. I'm wondering perhaps the next AGM, but you know the timescales, not to me to dictate.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That's I'm not aware of the network, as you said, that operates in England, but it's certainly something that I'd commit to exploring and seeing whether it's appropriate for us or if there is a Welsh alternative of that. I think it would help. And in terms of the issue of having a members champion for mental health, it's certainly something that I will discuss with colleagues and with yourself, and happy to have a further meeting about that to see what the opportunities are and whether it's appropriate. So thank you for both of those suggestions.
Thank you, councillors. The next question is also from County Councillor Laura Wright. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, me again, sorry. Can the Cabinet member please provide an update on the future of the Tudor Street building in Abergavenny?
And again, thank you, Councillor Wright, for your question. So, in short, the good news is that the Gathering community group were awarded charity status just before Christmas, and they've now signed a 12-month lease on Tudor Street, in line with the decision of Cabinet that we made last August, and the keys were handed over to the Gathering last week. That's the short answer. The slightly longer answer, I just want to say a little bit more about that. But also just put a little bit of background. It was 18 months ago that I first discussed with the group who then formed the Gathering about the potential for them to take over Tudor Street. And that 18 months ago, that kick-started a series of meetings that they had with myself and council officers to help them establish themselves as a formal organisation and to develop their business case. And this included granting them permission to use the Wellbeing Information Centre in Abergavenny as a base for 2 days a week, which they've been successfully doing for the past year. I was delighted to be invited to, as I know you were, Councillor Wright, and to attend their AGM on Monday this week, which was actually held in the Tudor Street building. Lots of people attended, and it was really good to hear so many of them offering their help to get the building ready for use. Although the Gathering, I can use that as a bit of publicity now, they would welcome more volunteers, whether it be to help clean the building, undertake repairs, or to sort out the garden, or to raise much needed funds, or to be a trustee and highlight they have a particular need for somebody to step up to be a treasurer of the group. So I do hope that some of the members in this chamber who have been vocal in their calls for Tudor Street to reopen will be willing to put their put their mouths where they, no, what's the phrase? Anyway, to roll up their sleeves and get involved and help. I would say the Gathering plan to be running activities from there in about 6 weeks once they've done that initial refurbishment, and building on the experience that they've gained from the last year operating from the Wellbeing Information Centre. They've already got an exciting range of activities planned, and they're actively seeking more people to step up and run an activity, whether it be for one session a week or one a month, or even one off. I would just like to say in conclusion, I think it is, I'm really pleased. I think it's so good after all the work that's been gone into it that we have a new community-based provision for vulnerable adults in the Abergavenny area. And I give my sincere congratulations to the Gathering team and my best wishes for them for the year ahead.
Councillor, do you have a supplementary question? I thought you might.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Chandler. I think I should also mention the fact that Councillor Jackie Strong and Councillor Sue Riley were also present at the AGM. I wouldn't want to not give them credit where it's due. And numerous Abergavenny town councillors too. I actually was going to call out for volunteers myself, so thank you for doing that. Anybody who's interested can just search for The Gathering Abergavenny on Facebook, and it'll give you some more information about how to get involved. And although I appreciate that The Gathering are now running this themselves as a charity, I do wonder whether there's any continuing support role that MCC might be able to offer over the next 12 months.
I think, you know, on that, we will continue to work with them. I mean, it's in our interest for The Gathering to succeed. So, you know, our community development team will be working with them the same as they do with other community organisations across Monmouthshire to try and help them prosper. And of course, you know, this is their opportunity. We'll be part of the leases. We're providing them with a rental reduction because of the work that they're doing in support, and we want them to be able to prove the concept of what they're trying to do, prove their business case, and to create a sustainable centre so that we can lead to negotiations to renew the lease in the future. But that depends on how this year goes. So again, that's why it's best if people can step up and help them the best they can. So thank you for your support, Councillor Wright, for the that you've given to The Gathering, and I look forward to a very good year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. The next item is a question from Councillor Pavia to Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Pavia.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Will the Cabinet member provide an update on what the Council is doing to enforce parking restrictions on High Street in Chepstow?
I very much thank Councillor Pavia for this question. He knows and I know that the question relates to a major issue of frustration among Chepstow residents who tell me that they feel they are living in the sort of lawless conditions you find in the American, or would have found in the American Wild West. Motorists appear to be parking where they want, how they want, without apparent restriction. This same question was raised at Chepstow Town Council last night in its dialogue with the local police officer. Parking enforcement, we were reminded, was transferred from the police by the last UK government, but we must conclude that this transfer occurred without local authorities being given the capacity to fulfil the role. I can report to the Council that there is not a total absence of enforcement on Chepstow High Street. In 2024, 7 parking enforcement notices were issued on the High Street. Councillor Pavia told me a few days ago he'd spotted one of the 7. The rate of issuing of these notices is therefore 1 every 2 months. We need to recognise the constraints. The signage on the High Street is not good. Fortunately, the Town Council has now agreed that the signage should be complemented by double yellow lines, and I look forward to those being put in place by the County Council. The current restrictions allow loading and unloading, and this is a challenge for enforcement officers as they must judge the activity being undertaken by the parked vehicle. Currently, our enforcement officers allow a 5-minute grace period between identifying a parked vehicle and issuing a notice. This appears to allow motorists to witness the presence of the enforcement officers and leave. We must recognise that maintaining the staffing levels in our enforcement team has been an unmet challenge ever since the transfer of responsibility from the police took place. As Council is aware, enforcement is part of the parking review which is currently taking place. Answers to the problem of places like Chepstow High Street are not obvious. I believe they will require creative solutions, and I look forward to all of us considering the conclusions of the review when they become available.
Thank you. Councillor Pavia, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Chair. Can I thank the Cabinet member for his response? He's absolutely right. It does feel like a lawless environment on occasion, and it certainly seems to have worsened post-pandemic, in my view. People, despite the restrictions of parking, to use retail and food outlets simply because of convenience, and it's regularly 6-7 cars there throughout the day. I think just before Christmas I counted 12 cars parked on the high street, and it causes significant congestion on the high street and the surrounding roads and surrounding network. And whilst there are frustrations with making progress on issues like the High Beach roundabout and other key infrastructure projects in and around Chepstow that are outside of our control, I think this very much is in our control and our gift to try and resolve. And I haven't even scratched the surface regarding to the frequent misuse of disabled parking bays on adjacent roads of Station Road and Bank Street. And Councillor Griffiths, you rightly said that I spotted a ticket, and it was on the abuse of a disabled parking bay in Station Road. So can the Cabinet member give a commitment, and I think he did in his response, to examine the enforcement capacity as part of the wider road review and look to deploy operatives across all the towns, but particularly Chepstow, to clamp down on what this I see as antisocial behaviour. Frankly, it needs to be clamped down on. It needs to be ended. Thanks, Chair.
I'm more than happy to do as Councillor Pavia suggests and continue to work through the review and other mechanisms to ensure that our enforcement is as effective as it can be. I just want to, one last point to say that the conditions in Chepstow are not unique to Chepstow. They are felt throughout the county, and I recognise that, and we must find answers across the county. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Next question is from Councillor Dimmock to Councillor Maybe. Councillor Dimmock.
Thank you, Chair. Some will be aware that the Council had to find an alternative solution to provide a much needed footpath from the new Alderwood estate being developed in my ward. This was after I established the original plans relied heavily on privately owned land belonging to residents living in treetops. Obviously, this resulted in a public consultation and the council proposing a one-way system. I would be grateful if the Cabinet member could provide a detailed explanation of the one-way system proposals for Crick Road. Specifically, can you outline the direction of traffic flow, whether the road will be resurfaced as part of the project, and if there are any plans to include a dedicated cycle route or any other improvements to pedestrian and cyclists, their safety, and how long this work will take?
Thank you, Councillor Dimmock. I understand that you had a site meeting on Friday with officers, so hopefully you'll have had clarification. And have you not?
No, unfortunately not. I did meet an engineer, but this falls outside his remit, so I didn't want to take his time up. And we looked at other things that he could help on.
Thank you. That's good to know. So maybe that's something that needs to be forthcoming. I'll do my best to answer you. I had hoped that you'd had that meeting. So to summarise what I understand then, the Crick Road Safer Routes and Communities scheme will provide a 2.5 metre shared footway and cycleway from the junction of the new residential development through to the entry point into ARW School. Does that make sense to you?
Okay.
As a consequence of the widened footway, a new one-way traffic system will be introduced, with the direction of travel being from Portskewett towards the B4245. The one-way system will start at the northwestern side of the Treetops Junction and will finish at a point approximately 38 metres southeast of the junction with the new development. This would be easier with a map, wouldn't it? The works are anticipated to be completed by the end of this financial year. And then the final bit of information I've got is that we've contacted the developer to carry out the carriageway resurfacing works as part of improvement works, and officers will keep you updated on progress. So it sounds like you still maybe want a site visit if that's not clear enough.
Yeah, with the relevant highways team that can help, that I think that would be useful. Thank you, Councillor Maybe. Residents will be overjoyed to hear that that road is going to be resurfaced, because it, you know, like I said previously in meetings, it is like a patchwork quilt. So just as long as I can be kept informed of the logistics of the works, and so I can update residents and parents and carers of children attending ARW, that would be great. It would also be useful if we could actually start providing updates using My Monmouthshire app. So if residents are in a certain area, maybe alerts going out, it's just something to consider. I think that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you. That was not so much a question and a supplementary question, but quite a dialogue, so I'm going to regard that matter as closed now. So 8.6, question from Councillor Dimmock to... 8.5, Councillor Dimmock to Councillor Catherine Maybe.
Thank you, Chair. I've been contacted by some residents. I've got some avid gardeners in Portskewett, and they're concerned that they may have missed out on a garden waste collection. So I was wondering if you could confirm if the changes in garden waste collections have affected the number of collections some areas have received.
Absolutely, yeah. There were changes made in collection days. I'm sure everyone who's residents of Monmouthshire will be aware of this this winter, as we completed the polypropylene bags rollout. So people changed from a week 1 to a week 2 and vice versa, in some cases. As a result, it seems that some customers missed 1 week of garden waste collection, and I understand that it could be 1,421 customers maximum. But others will have had an extra collection. This will have affected less than 10% of customers, but we have made efforts to mitigate any negative impact by taking extra waste at the next collection, so if people have an additional amount. The other thing that was also done to try and mitigate the impact was to provide an additional collection for Christmas trees and leaf fall, so some people were able to put out extra if they were building up extra at that point as well. We also did implement the changes as late as possible in the gardening season to limit the numbers impacted. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Maybe, and thank you for outlining the complexities involved in scheduling the garden waste collection changeover. And I fully appreciate the operational challenges faced by the team and the efforts made to minimise disruptions to residents. However, it is important to recognise that residents are paying a significant fee for this service, and they rightly expect to receive the full number of collections they have paid for. Whilst I understand with additional provisions such as Christmas tree collections, the perception among residents is that missed collections represent a loss of value for their money. It is crucial that we maintain that any unavoidable disruptions are clearly communicated with practical solutions in advance. Could you look into providing an additional collection for those 1,421 residents across the 9 communities in Monmouthshire who have missed out on a collection during this term?
So I think we've already done that in effect by providing the additional collection for Christmas trees and leaf fall. The garden waste collection, I do understand the point you're making, but at £55 for the year, it works out at, I think, £2.62 per collection. If you took 1 week out of that, I think that would be £2.75 per collection. So it's not a huge impact, but I completely get that if people have an accumulation of waste, it's a nuisance for them. But I think, so that's what we've tried to mitigate. It would be really difficult to provide another, and very expensive to provide a single collection, because it's done in combination with other refuse collection. But we always do our best to try and mitigate impact. I do get that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And the next question is from Councillor Dimmock to Councillor Sandals. Councillor Dimmock.
Thank you. Last one from me. It's been nearly 6 months since the council conducted the raid and seized 71 dogs at Lost Soul Sanctuary. This matter is still of significant concern to members of the public, and many are seeking what the welfare is of those dogs. But they also need to want some clarity on the resources allocated. Please could the Cabinet member confirm the total costs incurred to date for the investigation? So that's the operation or raid, if you want to call it, ongoing shelter costs of the seized dogs and legal representation associated with this case.
Diolch, Councillor Dimmock. I understand there's great public interest in this subject. However, it's actually been over 17 months since the operation was carried out, and I realise that you actually asked this question 6 months after the event at Council. So it's been 17 months. However, this matter remains the subject of criminal proceedings and is scheduled for trial in August 2025. It would be inappropriate for me to comment further until those legal proceedings have completed their due process. I hope you understand. Thank you.
Do I still get a supplementary?
You can try.
And I meant 16 months. Well, can you provide an update on the current welfare status of the dogs seized and how many have been domestically rehomed and what plans are for those that have not?
My previous comment still stands, Councillor Dimmock. Because of the legal proceedings, it is absolutely inappropriate to give you any information regarding this. As soon as we can, obviously we will. We understand there's great interest. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. And the next question is 8.7, County Councillor Brown to Catrin Maybe. Councillor Maybe.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Griffiths is going to respond to this one.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sorry, could I actually ask the question, please, Chair?
Yes.
You know, just for people who haven't aren't looking at the agenda.
Please do so.
Yeah, it's very short anyway. Please, can you provide an update on improvements to High Beach Roundabout, including nearby land at Mountain Road? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brown. I would have told Council before that after a sustained period of persuasion, a WellTag study on the High Beach Roundabout has commenced. A interim report has been presented and further work has been commissioned by the team involved in that study. As conclusions emerge, I will be very eager to share them with the whole Council and Councillor Brown in particular.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you for that update. I mean, my concern is due to the fact that local county councillors aren't involved in these meetings, and sometimes, although Transition Chepstow are involved, and obviously may not necessarily have the same local knowledge that elected councillors do about their particular areas. And, you know, for example, some of the suggestions that were put forward in WellTag 1 study, does the Cabinet member recognise the need for the action and emergency on significant improvements at High Beach Roundabout? It is actually Welsh Government responsibility to do something about it, as I understand that the roundabout and the trunk road into Chepstow are within the Welsh Government responsibility. It is ridiculous that local residents report to me that to get to Bristol from Chepstow, they have to leave at 6 a.m. in the morning to avoid the roundabout queues at 7:15 a.m. when Bristol is only 30 minutes away with no traffic delays. This also impacts local residents in Chepstow, as you never know when there's going to be a traffic delay, because it's not just peak times, it can be very unpredictable. This impacts people getting to local journeys, getting to work, as well as getting to hospital and GP appointments, and reduces the quality of life. I do understand that the Ken Skates has agreed to visit the High Beach roundabout with our Monmouth member of Senedd, Peter Fox, but no date has been fixed yet. And obviously my concern is with these WellTag studies, something needs to be done very urgently, and significant improvements, not just minor improvements. Thank you.
Was that a question? Did you pick up a question, Councillor Griffiths?
I'll pick up the element regarding to public engagement with the process. The process is primarily regarded, or the study is primarily regarded as a professional process. I've needed some sharp elbows to get myself around the table. What we must ensure is that the residents of Chepstow, the groups such as Transition Chepstow, and other local members such as Councillor Brown, are made fully aware of the analysis and the conclusions as they emerge. And I intend to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, could I just ask in relation to the statement?
No, I'm just sorry, we've done a question and had a supplementary question, so that's the end of that item.
Doesn't seem to say that county councillors will get an invite to these meetings where it's being discussed. Thank you.
County Councillor Jones to Councillor Sandals, please.
Thank you, Chair. County Councillor Penny Jones, just to differentiate from County Councillor David Jones. Thank you. In light of the recent proposals of the Democracy and Boundary Commission Cymru DBCC consultation relating to the 2026 review of Senedd constituencies, how can the residents of Monmouthshire be assured that this administration is working on their behalf to maintain the identity of Monmouthshire and all that that embodies?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Firstly, just briefly, it depends on which Monmouthshire you're talking about. Is it the original one, which was created by Henry VIII in 1536 and lasted for 400 years, or the current one, which has been around for less than 30 years, created in 1996? But seriously, though, the Democracy and Boundary Commission for Wales have the responsibility for undertaking the review of Senedd constituencies ahead of the 2026 election. The Commission are restricted by guidance from Welsh Government in how they can conduct the review, and it's limited to combining the existing 32 parliamentary constituencies in Wales into 16 new Senedd constituencies. Given that restriction and the geography of Monmouthshire as a boundary county, there are limited viable options that could be put forward. The Commission have proposed that the Monmouthshire constituency be combined with the Torfaen one, and the constituency being named Mynwy Torfaen. This proposal retains the whole of the county of Monmouthshire remaining together within a single constituency rather than being split between constituencies. How many times can I say that word? Sorry. As was the case previously. The proposal being put forward are for the 2026 election only, and the Commission will be tasked with a further review ahead of the 2030 election, which may well remove the restrictions on using UK parliamentary boundaries and may have a more significant impact on the county as a whole. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a supplementary question?
Thank you, Councillor Sandals. Yes, that does help, but in relation especially, I think I'm discussing the change of language, the fact that it's not going to be bilingual, that the change of names to Welsh. So due to the fact that the Boundary Commission recommendations were not brought to the Democratic Services or any other committee so that members could be consulted and give a response, the change of name has seemed to have slipped under the radar. We as county councillors are elected to serve the residents of Monmouthshire, many of whom are angry because the proposed change of the constituency name is not bilingual. We must not forget that despite the Welsh Government target for 1 million people in Wales to speak Welsh by 2050, that will still only mean that 1 in 3 people in Wales will do so. It is not the first language of Monmouthshire, and therefore the least we can do for our residents is to ask that our county names are bilingual. could the Cabinet member please give feedback and make it clear that the county councillors were not made directly aware of the consultation and work tirelessly on their behalf to ensure that the Monmouthshire name is retained in bilingual name changes. Thank you.
Diolch, Councillor Jones. In relation to the current review, a response has been submitted to the Commission as part of their consultation, recommending a change from Mynwy to Owain to Sir Fynwy to Owain. This proposal better reflects the county of Monmouthshire rather than the locality of Monmouth, but it will be for the Commission to consider whether to adopt this change when it publishes its final proposals. All members, political groups and political parties were able to respond to the consultation process with any alternative ideas that fall within the restrictions placed upon the Commission that could be put forward for future constituencies. I hope that helps.
Thank you, councillors. Next question is from Councillor Edwards to Councillor Grucott. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Could the Cabinet Member for Education inform Council of any proposed future investment the current administration intends to make in both Chepstow Comprehensive School and the Dell Primary School in Chepstow?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Members will recall that the groundwork and business case development for the King Henry VIII 3 to 19 through school commenced once Monmouth Comprehensive School project had been completed. I would like to say to members now that it gives me great delight to say that on Friday the 11th of April the keys for the 3 to 19 school will be handed over to the County Council. There will be 2 more County Council meetings, one the day before the school becomes our property. So exciting times in Abergavenny at the moment. Whilst there was every intention of commencing the early stages of the Chepstow project alongside the King Henry project, this hasn't been possible due to the resources in the Sustainable Communities for Learning team.
Pardon my interruption, Chair and Councillor Grucott, but I think you're answering the wrong question. That's the next question.
Question 9.
Question 9.
Question 9.
I am answering the question about the comprehensive and the Dell, so I will get around to it. Resources have been focused on completing the King Henry School, and as I say, that's very exciting. I was actually walking past it at 6 a.m. this morning, and the team were already hard at work. They're working 7 days a week in there now just to get it finished off, and it was quite a sight seeing people working hard at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd hasten to say I don't do it that often. But at the same time, we have been getting on with work in remodelling the nursery at Trellick and the former Mountain House Staff House, where we will accommodate part of the pupil referral service. And it's also worth mentioning, of course, the successful establishment this year of Ysgol Gymraeg Trefynwy, the Welsh medium school in Monmouth. Where numbers for next September, early enrolments, show that the school is doing well, and it's a joy to see that. However, having said that work has been undertaken to redline the Chepstow school site by external architects to determine what provision can be accommodated on the site and on the adjacent leisure centre area, I can also confirm that the Sustainable the Sustainable Communities for Learning rolling programme has been submitted to the Welsh Government in draft, and the development of Chepstow School project is included as the priority project for the 9-year rolling programme. I'd also like to mention that a few months ago now I was invited into Chepstow Comprehensive and given a superb presentation by a group of older pupils about their hopes for their school moving forward. And I thought that reflected a very positive relationship between the authority and the school, and it was a delight to listen to the youngsters with some really very sensible ideas. The high-level programme will be discussed at Cabinet in the coming months, and further work will then be undertaken to look at more detailed proposals, looking at the Chepstow cluster as a whole. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor?
I have definitely more than a supplementary, because he did actually answer the wrong question. That was the question about, as you said, the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, which replaced the 21st Century Schools Initiative, which was the next question. But going back to my original question about funding, current funding, that is, by this current administration, can I just give you a little bit of background? The last Conservative administration has spent around £3 million on Chepstow Comprehensive School, enhancing the facilities. When I had the pleasure of myself of visiting both schools since this time, it's quite clear that more work needs to be carried out to ensure that Chepstow's children have the best modern school and class environment with both staff and student appeal, in order to continue to stimulate learning and inspire both staff and students. They clearly have great inspirational staff who bring out the best in students there, given the results in recent years. And this continues where recently 33 early entry Year 11 pupils took their full mathematics and numeracy GCSEs, receiving outstanding results of A star and A grades. So when I have approached you on this subject at full council in the past about actual project work at the schools, either at full council or at committee, you have always attempted to reassure council that you have regular conversations with the school, and I quote, "They are more than happy with the scale of the investment that the authority has made." I'm not talking about a new school at the moment, that's the next question. So in a time where you have just announced in this year's budget, a draft budget, that £1 million has been allocated for, and I quote, "investment to meet the demands that schools are facing in restoring attendance levels and standards following the pandemic period." I mean, after all, surely this council can no longer rely on blaming the pandemic for any current standards. So can you reassure council that the scale of investment in the fabric of buildings and classrooms, as they currently are, is more than adequate? And you are simply not just biding time in the hope that Chepstow will finally get its opportunity for major school investment?
Thank you. I refer to my answer above, but would also add that whilst determining that Chepstow is the priority in the 9-year programme moving forward, officer meetings have been held to look at existing education provision within the Chepstow area. A meeting has been held between myself and Councillor Griffiths and the Chief Officer for Learning, Skills and Education and the Sustainable Communities for Learning Manager. We've met with the Chepstow cluster head teachers. And finally, the Sustainable Communities for Learning Manager and Project Officer have met with Stride, Treglown Architects and ICOM on several occasions to determine the scope and outcome of the feasibility work that has been undertaken on the Chepstow school site.
Thank you, councillors. And the last question, again from Councillor Christopher Edwards to Councillor Grucott. Question 10.
Thank you, Chair. Although I think there are two more questions after me. Could the Cabinet Member for Education inform Council of what internal and external meetings will be held in this Council term in relation to the Council's Chepstow School submission as part of the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, which replaced the 21st Century Schools Initiative, and what progress has been made to date, although you have answered that question just now. I don't know whether you want to add to it.
If you bear with me for 1 minute, I'm drowning in floods of paper here for a moment.
I'm going to suggest we move on or take or have a written response. Would that be agreeable, Councillor Edwards?
As Councillor Grocott has sort of partly answered that question in the answer earlier, can I ask a supplementary? Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Grocott, for your response earlier. Now, when I last asked this question, it was met with a response that can be summed up by saying the Council is having conversations with Welsh Government, which I personally simply read as if it's a conversation tagged onto another education-type meeting. In other words, no meaningful and meaty conversation at all. However, you did reassure me last time that the newly named the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme is a more agile programme, and you used those words, agile programme, with agile meaning the ability to move quickly and easily. And this Council must review and resubmit our programme by March 2024, which was last year. And this is to encourage a smooth transition, removing the stop-start actions associated with the current fixed-term investment programme, as it then was. These are your words. So as you said, as the new King Henry School in Abergavenny is due to open, what exactly went wrong? And what is going wrong with Chepstow's application, the final piece in our secondary school jigsaw? And considering this administration put an end to Conservatives' policy of any council assets that are to be sold being allocated to future school building projects, how will this future project be financed?
Well, I'm delighted to say that the project in Abergavenny is on time and seemingly amazingly in this day and age on budget, with actually some money left in contingencies if necessary. And it's not very often we hear that about public spending these days. So that is all looking good. I'm sorry, Councillor Edwards, is this your question? 8J.
I'm afraid that was the wrong town and the wrong school that you were referring to then. This is 8.10. Chepstow. St King's Mark Ward, Chepstow Comprehensive School.
I wonder if I could come back to you with a written answer to that. I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Grocott. I look forward to that. Thank you.
I'll certainly respond to you.
Thank you. Question 11, sorry, I've got a newer version of the agenda now. Question 11 is from Councillor Butler to Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chairman. To give context and for the benefit of listeners, my question relates to parents and learners in Penpellenny and Goitrafar who've had a very difficult start to this term with school transport. Some of the things that have been happening is that the pick-up time has been changed at short notice, or in some cases no notice at all. It's resulted in parents having to take children to school or collect the children at short notice.
Thanks, Councillor Butler.
Sorry?
I said thank you.
That's not the question, sorry, I'm giving context.
Okay, my apologies.
Sorry, it's okay. Weather and road conditions have closed the A4042 to the north of Llanelin, and that's contributed to some of these problems. But my main concern here is about the likely frequency of occurrence of the road closures as climate change starts to bite. So my question is, could the Cabinet Member for Education comment on the situation as regards school transport for students attending King Henry School from Penpellenny and Goitrafar? Thank you.
Yes, again, thank you for the question, Councillor Butler. Secondary learners travelling from Goitra and Penpellenny to King Henry are allocated to the 23 stagecoach public service bus. I see it rolling past my window every morning. And it's extremely reliable. You could almost set your clock by when it's going to come by. We did receive a number of complaints in the autumn term relating to the punctuality of this number 23 service, and following discussions with the operator, the timetable has been amended to better meet the needs of the learners. We are aware there were a number of issues as recently as the start of this term, which included poor communication of the timetable changes by Stagecoach as the operator, and delays associated with alternative routes due to flooding. We understand the timetable issues have now been resolved. However, we will continue to work with Stagecoach and respond to issues as they arise. There are a total of 27 learners allocated every day to this route. And it is in line with our published home-to-school transport policy, where we are attempting to maximise the use of public bus services to provide home-to-school transport for secondary-aged pupils where it's possible, as it reduces the number of traffic movements, carbon emissions, and helps to support the viability of rural public bus services. Complaints about public service buses are managed by the amazing Christian Schmidt and his team, as they are responsible for procurement and management of public bus services. All complaints are investigated, and where possible, we will implement changes to timetables, as we've seen with this number 23 service, as all operators have been advised that the highest priority is given to trips that are taking learners to school. If acknowledged that there is a service rolled out in September not performing as we'd intended, resulting in delays to learners travelling to and from school. In this case, the school did adjust its timetable, and those complaints, which earlier were justified, have now been mitigated. The timetabling problems were in part created by the amended school times. The timetable that was implemented in September reflected the school opening hours, as the public transport team were not made aware of the changes. But the current new timetable reflects the new school opening in really a matter of almost days now. So delay issues should hopefully be resolved, and as I say, I see it very regularly while I'm still enjoying my breakfast toast just after 8 o'clock in the morning, which I have to say was rather early to get to school. I don't think I arrived at school at 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. You've used up your 3 minutes as well. Councillor Butler, do you have a...
I do, thank you, yes. Thank you for your response. My concern here continues to be about measures that might have to be put in place to ensure that the service continues. Having explained earlier that we're having increasing road closures north of Llanelin, are we thinking about the route? How viable is this route likely to be? We're seeing more storms, more wet weather, more road closures. And right now, Storm, I'm going to try and attempt to say this, Owen, is bearing down on us, and I suspect that when I get home later that the road will again be closed, which causes an awful lot of issues for my residents and particularly for our children. So.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Yes, the A4042, as I think most members will know, is subject to quite regular flooding at Llanellan. And I can remember at a consultation meeting with the management of the new hospital at Llanellan, the Grange, being assured that the Welsh Government had undertaken massive drainage works and that there would be no further flooding at Llanellan. Well, in the comparatively short time since the Grange has been open, I think it has flooded just as regularly as it ever did. And the ability to get to the Grange, as I found out recently by personal experience, is certainly not easy. It involves getting a bus up from the railway station, which runs about every 30 minutes. That's not what I would call good public transport to visit people in hospital.
Thank you. Our last question today is from Councillor Keir to Councillor Maybe. Councillor Keir.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Could the Cabinet Member please advise what dedicated resources are currently available to MCC for the clearing of highway drains? And in light of recent flooding issues that we're all aware of, will additional financial support be given to fund next year's programmes of works?
Thank you. We have 24 frontline staff covering the whole county. They cover all highway duties, from road sign replacement through to emergency response and clearing drains. These are the same frontline staff. We have 2 vactors and 2 sweepers to cover approximately 1,600 kilometres of road and 20,000 drainage assets. We were given additional capitalisation grant funding in 2021, thank you, previous administration, for dedicated drainage works, which gave us an additional vector, which we're still running. We prioritised the main routes with this additional resource so that other teams could focus on the rest of the network. But, as was addressed in the previous question, the frequency of storms and a history of underfunding going back perhaps 10 to 15 years and the flooding that we're now experiencing means that we struggle to be as proactive as we would like to. We do proactively clear grids, drains and culverts that we know flood during named storms, so we do try and prioritise as best we can given those limited resources, and we do our best to focus those resources on the areas identified in the actual storm announcements. But the frequency of these storms and the intense rainfall that we're experiencing do indeed highlight the need for additional capacity for highways operations in general, and I will always look for this and raise this need wherever I can. However, as we've discussed before, this is an immense need and one that, however we juggled our internal budgets, I don't believe that we would be able to meet to the standard that we would like to. I think it's a need for capital investment across the entire country, across the UK, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I would add, however, the points I was making at the previous council to make sure that we're also realistic and understand that this is not only about highways. Indeed, the rainfall that we get in these severe storms linked to climate change is more than any highways drainage could cope with all at once, however brilliant it is. And you only have to look at the impact of storms across the world to understand that. Such intense rainfall takes time to drain away. So even with fully clear drains at the start of a storm, they would struggle initially and it would only slowly drain away. Many of the ditches adjacent to the highways network are actually field ditches, and should be maintained by the landowner. And what we are facing, and was clear in the last storm, is that soil runoff from fields is a major contributory factor, bringing debris with it. In other words, we're asking highways drainage to drain entire mountains for us. I'm just trying to be realistic about what we're looking at here and the wider issues. Changes in land management practice will be the only long-term sustainable solution.
You're running out of time.
Thank you. Just a couple of more sentences. With long-term associated benefits both for river pollution and reduction in soil loss. And our officers are supporting initiatives from Welsh Government, NRW and Dŵr Cymru to promote natural flood management in farmland to try and ensure that happens. And the importance of us working in the Usk and Wye partnerships is highlighted there. Thank you.
Councillor Keir.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maybe. And of course, I hear what you say with regards to climate change, and indeed, we did discuss this at the last council meeting. I and other colleagues in this room have been receiving MIMON responses saying to flooding that we are reporting of, clearing of drains, saying we are experiencing very high volumes of similar maintenance issues. Your query is within an extremely long list of queries and will be addressed as soon as possibly can. Unfortunately, we cannot give a timescale of when this may be. So whilst I hear what you say, are you able, is there a system, are you able to drill down, as your office is able to drill down, to discover how big this backlog is? Because I think, as you said, we need to be realistic and to be able to advise our residents of what is actually happening. And are you able to say how many are being cleared in a reactionary manner or in a proactive manner? Because as I've mentioned to you before, I hear what you say again about storms coming in. But we as elected members are aware of hotspots and that should be cleared on a regular basis that aren't. And indeed, driving here today, with that storm we had this morning, those same hotspots are flooding. So is there a system in place to proactively look at these hotspots? I ask that again. And are you or your colleagues aware of how big this backlog is, so that when I go back to my residents in response to the MIMON reporting of flooding, I can go back to them with a realistic answer rather than over-promise? And I hear exactly what you say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Unfortunately, I think it's an impossible question that you're asking me. There are so many ditches and different spots around Monmouthshire. I couldn't give you a single answer to that, except to say that I think it's a discussion, the whole discussion around land management and drainage and the way that the land and the highways drainage interacts is something that's being discussed in a lot of detail in the Usk and Wye partnerships. I've also listened to a debate in Westminster Hall about it recently. It's an issue across the country. And I think probably the most useful, for me, the most hopeful way forward is what I'm seeing in terms of the studies that are being done in those partnerships. I refer to the work done by the Wye and Usk Foundation, which estimated that 80% of the water storage in the Upper Usk catchment was actually in the soils. And I think ultimately, otherwise we're trying to fill holes in a bucket, which is forever creating new holes. That's not a very good analogy. It's an ongoing discussion, and I know it's a really difficult one, but I don't want to try and give false promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That brings us to the end of today's meeting. Thank you all for your participation and attending, and in particular thank you to all the officers who've supported this in the room but also behind the scenes. Invaluable as always. A safe journey home, and I hope you don't get too wet. Good night.